The sun rose over the western sea, like molten gold poured upon an obsidian platter. And Casterly rock drank the light with greedy facets. Terraces and towers shimmering, ramparts glowing, veins of bright ore glinting just beneath the lion-carved faces. Sea eagles circled its crags, crying their harsh paeans as if hailing a king newly crowned. Within the stone entrails of the rock, the pulse of a waking realm could be felt. The clatter of kitchen knives, the grind of winches on distant portcullises, the soft groan of timber as salt-sprayed balconies warmed in the dawn. Tyrion Lannister stood alone upon the eastern parapet, hands folded behind his back, the breeze combing invisible fingers through his pale blonde hair. For a long while he let the wind speak for him, carrying away the scents of brine and forge smoke, of fresh-baked loaves and morning manure from the stables far below. When at last he drew breath, it was the measured inhalation of a man accepting the exact weight of his station. No crown rested upon his brow, but the stones themselves seemed to salute him, for a lord of Casterly Rock needed no circlet, only the rock and the name Lannister. He remembered the taste of dust on the King's Road, the sneers offered by brothers in arms, the scorn of courts that weighed height and handsomeness above wit. He remembered darker things too, the stench of the Blackwater after wildfire, the echoing laughter of a father who would never be satisfied, the iron tang of crossbow bolts in shadowed privies. Those memories did not pain him this morning. They hardened him, like ore hammered into rings of defense, and they reminded him that peace, if it were to be forged, must be beaten on anvils of bedrock truth and cooled in waters of mutual need. A hush fell across the courtyard as the great bronze doors rumbled outward, and a file of crimson-cloaked guards marched into formation. Sir Adam Marbrand bowed, flame-colored hair tucked beneath his helmet. "My lord." The small council is gathered in the Star Chamber. His voice carried the deference once reserved for Tywin alone. Tyrion inclined his head no more than an inch. The gesture felt oddly heavy, as though centuries of Lannister expectation pressed upon the hinge of his neck. Yet the weight did not bend him. The walk to the Star Chamber, a vault carved with constellations that glittered with crushed gemstones, took longer than necessary. Tyrion enjoyed the measured pace, allowing servants and soldiers alike to notice his passage. Their eyes lingered upon him, some bright with cautious hope, others hollowed by uncertainty. It mattered little. What they saw was a truth in motion. A dwarf no longer overshadowed, a lion given dominion. He felt them drawing comparisons to Lord Tywin, to Jaime even, but also charting differences. He lacked his father's towering form and his brother's effortless swagger, yet he bore something both had lost: unbroken curiosity. Inside the chamber, a handful of men and women stood waiting beneath a sky of jeweled lapis. Lord Mathis Rowan of Goldengrove shifted his weight from heel to heel, mustache trembling like a nervous dormouse. Beside him, the Lady Dorna Swift adjusted silken cuffs, her half-smile fixed and unreadable. Maester Lunthor, freshly come from the Citadel, pressed fingertips to parchment laid across a map of the Reach and the Westerlands, while Sir Brone the Tall, a hedge knight raised up for unimpeachable valor at Tumbleton, cradled his helm against a breastplate, dented but polished bright. Dented but polished bright. At the far end, seated upon a carven stone bench beneath the figure of the lion constellation, was the only one whose approval Tyrion truly craved. Brienne of Tarth, sworn to his service these past 2 moons, eye steady as a winter lake. "My lords, my ladies," Tyrion began, his voice filling the vault. "Casterly Rock awakens to a new tune, but let not the melody deceive us. Gold does not flow without miners, nor peace bloom without planters. We meet today to discuss harvests of grain and of goodwill." He let the words settle. No jests, no salacious boasts, only tempered steel. Maester Lunthor unfurled a scroll, wax seals popping like tiny bones. Figures, tallies, shipments delayed by bandits along the Gold Road. It was the same bitter gruel served at every council in every realm. Yet as Tyrion listened, he sliced each problem open with questions, exposing marrow. Why had the bandit raids increased near the Green Fork? What promise might sway House Charlton to patrol those routes? Could surplus wool from Case be traded for Blackwood lumber to rebuild washed-out bridges? He wove solutions like threads on a shuttle, and the council followed, uncertain yet entranced. When the formalities ended, Rowan lingered by the map, tapping a knuckle where the reach's border brushed the eastern hills. "Old rumors of Tarly aggression," he murmured. Tyrion leaned closer. "Randall Tarly's sword is sharp, but his purse is shallow. Offer him a Royshian maester versed in seacraft. He'll fancy the gift and forget our caravans." Rowan's brows rose, respect dawning. Peace, Tyrion mused, was often purchased with wisdom, not coin. Outside, gulls wheeled above the western cliff face, their cries puncturing quiet corridors. Tyrion made his way toward his father's old solar, accompanied by Brienne. "You spoke well," she said, voice low. A compliment from her was rarer than Valyrian steel. "I spoke truly," he replied, though warmth spread in his chest. Truth is seldom the coin of councils. She considered this. That may be why they listened. The solar smelled of leather and lemon oil. Tywin's long desk remained, but Tyrion had replaced the stiff, high-backed chair with one size to his frame, sturdy, wide, comfortable enough to invite contemplation. Beside it stood a smaller table littered with goblets, flasks of ink, a dusty copy of the Jade Compendium, and one golden lion statuette missing a paw. A token, perhaps, of imperfection embraced. He poured 2 cups of fortified wine from arbor grapes and offered one to Brienne. She shook her head. "Daylight, an ancient enemy of the drink," Tyrion conceded, sipping. "But a friend to sober judgment, so I keep both near." He gestured to a cushioned bench. "Sit, Sir Brienne, please. Your legs deserve respite." She obeyed reluctantly, armor creaking, gaze surveying tapestries once hidden beneath Tywin's stern banners. Tyrion had chosen them himself. Scenes of rivers and vineyards, of smithies and children at play, sewn in hues of amber, emerald, and dawn pink. They were reminders that a realm was more than its wars. A soft knock broke their solitude. Podrick Payne entered, cheeks flushed. "A raven, my lord, from River Run. Lady Sansa Stark writes." Tyrion's heart beat faster, despite years of effort to school it. He accepted the scroll and waved Podrick away with thanks. The seal, a direwolf grayed by dust, cracked beneath his thumb. The writing was neat, decisive. She spoke of a summer fair planned on the banks of the Tumblestone, of merchants seeking Westerland silver in exchange for northern furs. At the end she added a single line. "I trust wisdom sits more comfortably upon you than chains." It was signature and salute both. He let the parchment curl closed. The North yet remembered him, not only as a Lannister, but as a man who once sheltered Sansa in King's Landing's cruel court. That slender thread of memory might braid future peace. Brienne noted his faraway look. "Good tidings. Perhaps the best kind," he murmured. "An invitation to barter bread for fur. To trade suspicion for bread and salt." Outside the window the sunrise had edged toward full morning, rays striking the sea hard enough to conjure mirrors. For an instant, Tyrion's reflection shimmered upon the water far below. Small, warped, but undeniably present. He stared until the sun climbed higher, and the image dissolved. The rock would outlast him, as it had every lord before. But while he lived, he would carve passages no less enduring than hidden lodes of gold. He dispatched ravens all that day, to Highgarden, to Dorne, to the Eyrie, and even across the narrow sea to Braavos, where bankers counted wars like coins. Each letter held different words, yet shared a single tenor. The lion's roar would henceforth sound softer, though no less sure, inviting trade pacts, proposing mutual harbor patrols, suggesting marriages born of respect, not conquest. These were small stones, he knew, but gathered wisely they could dam torrents of blood. The next morning brought word from King's Landing. Queen Margaery, resplendent Rose of the Reach, requested Tyrion's counsel on rumored sellsword companies massing near the disputed lands. Her letter, fragrant with summer wine perfume, bore a coda written in needle-fine script. "Your mind has ever been sharper than my grandmother's tongue. Pray lend it now to the realm." He chuckled, remembering Olenna's barbs. The Queen's request was no idle courtesy. War's shadow still loomed after the wars of the Five Kings, and the Iron Throne's coffers were perilously light. Yet he hesitated to depart the rock so soon. The foundation of peace lay first at home. That eve he summoned every bannerman of the Westerland still within riding distance. Craighall and Falwell, Westerling and Lefford, small lords of sheep-cropped valleys and river-slick ravines. They filled the feasting hall beneath chandeliers wrought of golden lion claws. No musicians played, no casks were broached. Instead, Tyrion climbed upon a trestle table and addressed them plainly. He spoke of coffers diminished by decades of vain pageantry, of fields left fallow for want of hands conscripted into pointless skirmishes, of daughters traded like coin and sons buried like debts. He offered them a bargain: lay down grudges, raise up granaries, invest in fishermen, in weavers, in masons, and in trade roads. In return, the Rock would reduce taxes by 1/10 for each year the peace held. The hall buzzed with wary whispers. A Lefford called it folly, a Westerling termed it trust. Tyrion listened, then sealed the pact with numbers, projected yields, shipping tariffs, temple endowments. Gold, like faith, required proof. 3 days later, ravens returned, heavy-winged with parchment. Olenna Tyrell herself, still alive and still lethal, wrote that Casterly Rock's offer of Lion Gate grain at reduced levy would ensure her grandson's realm survived the next winter. The parchment smelled faintly of roses and sarcasm. Try not to dilute the wine of your intent with too much water of diplomacy, she warned. A lion that purrs may yet keep claws. Tyrion read the line aloud to Brienne and laughed until his sides ached. In the dungeons, a warren repurposed from oubliettes long unused. Tyrion ordered the rusted cages broken down, the shackles melted to farm tools. He walked the tunnels himself, lantern bobbing, remembering the first time he had been flung into a sky cell, how madness had nipped his heels. Justice thrives in daylight, he told the captain of his guard. If you must cage a man, let all of the Rock see why. Some prisoners were freed, others set to labor, a few turned over to septons for penance. The echo of clanging iron ceased within a fortnight. As summer strengthened, envoys began arriving like swallows homing. A Volantine factor in striped silk sought permission to build a counting house in Lannisport. He brought fig wine and a promise to employ local scribes. A Dornish princess, Elisand, quick of tongue, came bearing sun-kissed oranges and a letter from Prince Doran, a proposal for a mutual escort of merchant convoys skirting the stepstones. Even Lord Paxter Redwine sent casks of the Arbor's boldest gold in exchange for rights to fish near Fair Isle. Tyrion received them all in a modest audience chamber, draped not with crimson satins but with woven maps of contested seas. He positioned himself deliberately in a shadow softened by candlelight. At first glance, visitors failed to notice his stature. By the time they did, many had already conceded respect to his voice. Yet peace was not conjured by scrolls alone. On the Rock's northern marches, a feud festered between the Greenfield and the Conklin clans, border shepherds whose blades were sharper than their wits. Sheep vanished, wells were poisoned, a Conklin boy left blind by lime dust in the night. Tyrion rode out with a meager retinue, Brienne, Podrick, and a double handful of guards, and called both clans to a parley in a ruined sept. He spoke neither as lord nor judge but as witness. He let the boy's mother weep upon his shoulder. He let an aging Greenfield spit accusations until froth gleamed on his beard. When the rage had emptied them, Tyrion offered grain seed and timber for shared pasture pens, the cost borne equally by both sides. He took from each clan a single hostage child, to be fostered at the Rock and schooled side by side. When you break bread across the same table, the taste of vengeance sours, he told them. They agreed, grudgingly at first, then with dawning relief, as though peace were a burden they had long been waiting to set down. Autumn threatened early that year. Mists rolled inland from the sunset sea, veiling vineyards in ghostly gauze. Tyrion stood on a high balcony one fog-washed morning, rolling a river stone in his palm, its surface smoothed by decades of current. Brienne approached. "The raven from Winterfell," she said, offering a sealed note. He split the wax. "Jon Snow, now Lord of Winterfell," wrote in sparse lines, An expedition to Hardhome returns with free folk willing to trade furs for southern steel. Safe passage through the neck depends on southern lords' goodwill. Tyrion traced the letters, imagining snowdrifts and icicle beards, the stubborn hope of a people once called wildlings. He penned a swift reply: "The Lion's roads shall open, and guest rights be honored. Let them come." That night he dreamed of a banquet where northern hunters sat beside Reachman vinters, where Dornish bards plucked harps for Baratheon smiths, where salt wives of Pike dipped bread into Lannister stew. Then the dream shifted, shadows lengthening. He awoke with the name Cersei on his lips, the taste of ashes in his mouth. Peace, he knew, had enemies wedded to chaos, and his sister was chief among them. Sure enough, news arrived with winter's first gust. Lady Paramount Cersei Lannister had slipped free of Wretchguard custody, aided by unknown allies, and vanished along the Blackwater. Some whispered she fled toward the Stormlands, others that she sought refuge in the remnants of Qyburn's black science. Tyrion felt the old tremor of dread, but he steadied it with a draught of clarity. "We must prepare," he told Brienne, summoning scribes. Not for open war. Cersei had neither army nor coin sufficient, but for venom spread in rumor and secret dagger. He tripled watch rotations, secured the Raven Coat, and dispatched discreet envoys to the free cities for any hint of her passage. Despite the looming storm, the Rock's halls rang with new music. Laughter of apprentices learning letters, clack of looms in repurposed barracks, strains of a Myrish lute echoing in colonnaded gardens. Tyrion toured the lower wards where miners once slumped beneath debts owed to Lannister usurers. Now, debt notes were forgiving gradients, payable through labor on roads and in fisheries. In the granary he sampled barley beer brewed by a one-armed veteran, declared it finer than Dornish red, and paid double the asking price, prompting cheers that rattled silo doors. Each gesture cost little gold, but minted wealth of loyalty. One crisp evening a horn call rose from the outer gate. A procession climbed the serpentine road. 100 riders in stark gray, banners limp in the seaside wind. At their head rode Sansa Stark beside her brother Bran, the boy who had once flown. Tyrion received them in the square beneath glowing lanterns. Sansa dismounted with quiet grace, eyes solemn yet unafraid. "Lord Tyrion," she said, "you summoned peace. The North answers." He bowed as deeply as his stature allowed. "Lady Sansa, you honor stone with your presence. Welcome to Casterly Rock." Bran's chair wheels crunched gravel. He studied the walls with ageless calm. "These stones remember," he murmured. Tyrion knelt, humbled by the three-eyed boy's distant gaze. "Then may they remember kindness," he whispered. That night, a feast was held. Modest compared to the excess of past Lannisters, yet warm. Salt-crusted fish, rye bread, roasted squab, sweet carrots glazed in honey. Northern guests were seated beside Westermen, watchfully at first. Ale soon loosened smiles. Tyrion saw Podrick teaching a Mormont girl a bawdy tavern tune, while Brienne conversed with Ser Jorah about bear sigils and unbreakable oaths. At the high table, Sansa met his eyes over a cup of mulled wine. For once, no ghosts of King's Landing lurked between them. When dawn tinged the sea pink, Tyrion walked the ramparts with Bran, wheels whispering on worn stone. "You seek to bend Time's river," Bran said, voice echoing inside shadowed hood. "Perhaps," Tyrion replied. "Or to redirect its course from rapids to glades." Bran's pale lips curved in something almost a smile. "Rivers are stubborn." Tyrion tapped the balustrade. "So is rock." Letters flowed faster thereafter, a tapestry of ink stitching realms. The Iron Bank agreed to refinance the crown's debt on condition of yearly audits conducted jointly by maesters and bean counters from the Reach. Dorne pledged 10 years of peace if border tariffs were halved. Even Old Town's High Septon wrote a blessing for the humble lion who remembers mercy. Tyrion accepted each accord, not as laurels, but as bricks in a fragile arch. One flaw might collapse the span. The flaw announced itself one frigid night, when storms battered the bay. An assassin was found in the scriptorium, blades soaked in the life of Maester Lunthor. Brienne pursued, steel flashing in torchlight, but the killer flung himself from a window and was dashed upon spikes far below. In his pouch were coins stamped with a crowned stag, old Baratheon mint. Yet the trail led back to no Stormlord. Tyrion stood over the maester's still form, grief a tight band about his ribs. Peace had drawn blood at last, and its enemies had names yet hidden. He convened the chiefs of the newly reformed City Watch, men chosen for honesty, not lineage, and charged them to seek truth, not scapegoats. Meanwhile, he crafted a public decree. Any realm or faction proving involvement in the murder would answer before a tribunal comprising all 7 kingdoms. A bold claim untested. Some lords scoffed, but the people listened. For the first time in living memory, a lord offered justice beyond borders. Winter settled lightly that year, frost silvering vines, snow dusting parapets like sifted flour. Casterly Rock felt smaller beneath its hush, yet warmer within. Fires crackled in hearths where once only echoes dwelt. Tyrion spent long nights in his father's library, deciphering ledgers older than Aegon's conquest. He learned of forgotten debts owed the Rock by river traders, of ancestral pacts with ironborn houses long extinguished, of dowries promised but never paid. Instead of collecting, he cancelled half those claims, writing letters of absolution. Each debt forgiven was a chain struck from the ankle of tomorrow. On the morning of the new year, the first northern merchant train arrived, wagons laden with ermine pelts, mammoth ivory, and rare blue sapphires from Skagos. Tyrion greeted them at the Lion Gate, distributing tokens good for hot baths and fresh bread. Children clambered off sledges to gape at lion statues. Mothers warmed chilled hands at braziers. The Rock's market square filled with accents seldom heard so far south. And when a quarrel erupted between a sell-sale and a green boy from the Rills, Tyrion intervened personally, restoring calm with a jest about sausage casings and bravery. The crowd laughed. Tension evaporated like breath in sunlight. Yet, outside walls, rumors crawled like frost spiders. Black-cloaked riders were seen along the river road, bearing a golden lion set within a blazing crown. A sigil new and terrible. Some claimed Cersei had forged alliances with sellsword captains, dismissed after the War of the Five Kings. Others whispered of wildfire caches, left forgotten beneath King's Landing, ready for a queen in exile. Tyrion listened, eyes narrowed, every tale measured against his sister's appetite for ruin. He doubled patrols, fortified gatehouses, but more importantly, he continued hosting feasts of accord. A single match cannot burn a forest drenched in rain, he told his council. Still, rain must fall. It came in torrents the day the Raven from Old Town arrived. The parchment, smudged by storm water, carried a terse report. Spies traced Cersei to the Shield Islands, where she courted ironborn reavers disaffected by their king. She promised them plunder of Lannisport in exchange for ships. Tyrion felt his heart stutter. The Rock's harbor cities were vulnerable. Gold helmets and city walls mattered little against a fleet slipped in under moonless sky. He summoned Lady Dorna Swaft, whose kin commanded Lannisport's fleet. Together, they drafted letters summoning every shipwright, every long idle dockhand. They borrowed tactics from the very pirates who threatened them, fire ships rigged to block narrow channels, chains to be stretched across harbor mouths, beacon towers manned night and day. Tyrion ordered the minting of special tokens redeemable for silver, each time a local fisherman reported a sighting of foreign sails. Within a week, 1,000 eyes scanned the horizons at dawn. But he knew preparations alone would not suffice. He needed alliances strong enough to deter Cersei's storm before it gathered. So he penned his boldest gambit yet, an invitation for a summit at River Run to be hosted jointly by Houses Stark, Tully, Tyrell, Martell, Arryn and Lannister. The topic would be nothing less than a charter, an accord binding all great houses to mutual defense, trade standards, and an arbitration council based in neutral land. Lords might scoff, maesters might call it folly, yet seeds cast on fertile soil sometimes sprouted into oaks. Sansa agreed at once, as did Prince Doran. Margaery, after consulting her grandmother, sent word of cautious assent. The Ares boy lord Sweet Robin, guided by Lord Nestor Royce, chirped that knights of the Vale hungered for purpose beyond mountain passes. Even Stannis Baratheon's widow, now Lady of Dragonstone, dispatched a raven written in her own rigid hand. The Lord's justice is served through order. Summons accepted. Tyrion exhaled, feeling the world shift beneath his boots. On the eve of departure for Riverrun, he stood again upon the eastern parapet where his journey began. The sea lay calm, a sheet of hammered silver beneath the half-moon. Footsteps padded behind him. "Podrick." "My lord," the lad said softly. "The last wagon is loaded. We ride at dawn." Tyrion nodded. "Get some rest, Pod. Tomorrow we begin convincing lions and wolves, falcons and roses, suns and fish to share the same river." Podrick scratched his head. "Seems a big river." Tyrion smiled. "Big enough to drown old grudges if we choose." When Podrick left, Brienne took his place. She offered no words, only her steadfast presence. Tyrion leaned against the battlement, gazing toward a horizon he could not see in the dark, yet felt all the same. "Do you believe walls can remember?" he asked. Brienne considered. "Perhaps stones remember weight lifted from them." He laughed quietly. "Then let us lighten more stones, Sir Brienne." Far below, waves sighed against the rock, ancient and tireless. Above, a solitary star pierced a ragged cloud bank, bright and unblinking. Tyrion raised a hand as if in salute, though whether to the star, to the peace yet unmade, or to the ghosts who had shaped him, he could not say. The night yielded no answers, only steady breath of wind smelling of distant snow and nearer hope. And so the Lion of Casterly Rock prepared to leave his den, not to conquer but to commune. He carried no sword larger than his wit, no shield heavier than his resolve. Yet in his wake he left a rock transformed. Chains melted to plowshares, dungeons opened to light, kitchens redolent with stews thick enough to sate a miner or a maester alike. Whether peace would root deeply or be uprooted by the wrath of blood yet unshed, none could know. But Tyrion Lannister meant to gamble every scrap of gold, every quip, every scar, and every breath upon the chance. For gold, after all, was but a metal. Peace, by contrast, was immeasurable wealth. And Tyrion, born small, belittled, overlooked, had grown into a lord whose ambition outshone the rock itself, an alchemist transmuting pain to policy, doubt to daring. Tomorrow the banners would unfurl, the hooves would churn winter grass, and the slow work of forging a lasting concord would begin beneath watchful sky. In the stillness before dawn, as torches guttered and servants dozed on stool legs, Tyrion whispered into the wind words meant for no ear, but history's. Let this be the age of dialogue, not daggers. The wind carried the vow seaward, where waves would repeat it forever against stone. He turned from the parapet at last. Behind him, Casterly Rock stood silent, colossal, yet somehow softened, as though the ancient lion crouched in marble slumber dreamed of cubs unblooded by war. Ahead, corridor torches beckoned. Tyrion walked toward them at an unhurried pace, the measured tread of a lord who understood that the longest journeys were composed of small, deliberate steps. The sky had only just begun to pale when the horns sounded throughout Casterly Rock. Their low, rolling note seemed to seep up from the bones of the fortress and spill into every corridor, summoning grooms, scribes, guards, and sleepy-eyed pages to their posts. Horses stamped in torchlit courtyards, where mist drifted like ghostly banners, and lanterns bobbed along ramparts as watchmen saluted their lord's departure. Tyrion Lannister woke before the second horn, bathed his face in cold water, and let the chill finish what dreams had begun. A cleansing of yesterday's triumphs and terrors so that this day could stand unburdened. He dressed without fuss. A well-tailored doublet of dark crimson, stamped with a small golden lion at the heart, sturdy riding boots oiled against snow, a short cloak of black wool pinned with a single garnet brooch. In the adjoining chamber, Brienne of Tarth adjusted the leather straps of her brigandine, each buckle fastened with methodical care. Podrick Payne, already armored in boiled leather, hovered near the doorway clutching a ledger and a pack bulging with sealed scrolls. The lad's eagerness vibrated like a plucked lute string. Bread first, Tyrion said, voice hushed by Pradon quiet. Diplomacy conducted on an empty stomach leaves much room for ill-tempered echoes. He chewed a heel of warm barley bread spread with fig preserve, while Brienne polished the edge of her longsword. When the last crust was gone, he wiped his fingers, donned a pair of riding gloves, and nodded. The journey to River Run would span 9 days if snow did not thicken. 9 days of hoofbeats and icy dawns, of campfires throwing long shadows against dark trees, of planning conversations and impromptu councils beneath awnings flapping in winter wind. They descended wide steps into the inner ward, where the procession formed. 20 crimson-cloaked guards led the van, helms bristling with lion crests, nearly as bright as their discipline. Behind them rolled 4 wagons laden with parchment, ink, and modest barrels of the Rock's finest ale. Peace, Tyrion had learned, could be sweetened by a well-timed cask. The 5th wagon carried bolts of Lannisport, wool-dyed sea green and dusk blue, gifts for House Tully's weavers. Horses for the small folk outriders snorted steam, their manes rimed with frost. A pair of Taroshi falconers stood ready with hooded birds meant to impress the veiled delegation. Tyrion hoped the falcons might also lighten the mood when inevitable squabbles arose over precedence and protocol. He approached his mount, an iron-gray destrier whose temperament matched Tyrion's morning moods, wry, patient, but capable of sudden flares. The stablemaster knelt to offer a stirrup. Tyrion climbed with practiced ease, back straight in the saddle despite the ill-fitting accommodations dwarfs too often receive. A special saddle crafted by a Lannisport leatherworker supported his legs without humiliation, its genius design invisible beneath an embroidered blanket. He patted the destrier's neck. "Easy, Balios," he whispered, invoking the name of a half-forgotten Valyrian philosopher whose writings on paradox amused Tyrion. The horse flicked one ear as if pondering dialectics. A bell rang thrice. The portcullis shuddered upward. Wind off the sunset sea struck Tyrion's face crisp and sharp like new copper. He inhaled deeply. "Ride," he ordered. And the procession began its careful descent along the ramp carved inside the cliff's face, spiraling downward through sentry towers and carved arches lit by whale oil lamps. Miners paused at rails to watch. Hard men with pick-scarred hands raising caps in silent salute. Tyrion returned each gesture with a lift of his gloved hand. Gold and iron had long ruled these tunnels. It was time the miners knew their lords saw them, not merely their yield. The cavern mouth yawned open upon a coastal road slick with frost. Daylight, thin and wan as watered milk, bled across combers hurling foam against black rocks. Gulls shrieked overhead, heralds of some salt-soaked coronation none would attend. Tyrion spurred to a measured trot. The road wound eastward, flanked by stone pines, bent seaward by generations of wind. Their trunks twisted like old men's backs yet unbroken. By mid-morning, the procession reached the first of many small villages scattered through the coastlands. Garnet's Rest, named for reddish cliffs where crabs clambered. Smoke curled from turf roof huts, mingling with the smell of nettle soup. Villagers emerged, clutching blankets round shoulders, children peeking from behind skirts. Tyrion reined in. "Open the supply wagons," he told Podrick, "and pass out oatcakes." The gesture cost little, but the cheer it purchased glowed bright in tired eyes. A toothless elder clasped Tyrion's boot, tears shining. "My lord, the mines take our sons. You send them home whole now." Tyrion's throat thickened. "Whole, and with wages rightly paid," he said, and meant it as oath. They pressed on, leaving visible relief in their wake like footprints in snow. At noon clouds bruised the sky. Sleet hissed against cloaks. Brienne directed tents raised in a hollow of wind-sheltered birches, and the caravan huddled round braziers fed with resinous pine. Tyrion shared a simple meal of salt pork and lentils, dictating letters under the canvas pavilion. Reports for Lady Dorna on harbor defenses. Instructions for Sir Adam Arbrand to extend tax reprieves to dairy herders near Ashamar. A personal note of condolence to Maester Lunthor's sister in Lannisport. Ink froze at the nib. Podrick warmed each vial between cupped hands. Night fell quickly. Wolves howled beyond the tree line, their voices layered like choristers of darker gods. Tyrion lay upon a feather pallet, cloak pulled to chin, eyes fixed on canvas rippling above. Sleep crept, slow. When it came, it brought a vision of his father's hand closing about a goblet, then shattering it to reveal a sprouting sapling in place of wine. Tywin's eyes widened, but whether in pride or horror, Tyrion could not tell before dawn's horn wrenched him awake. The second day carried them inland over rolling downs where snow clung in creases. The golden tooth's distant ramparts caught afternoon's sun, their pale reflection flickering across icy streams. Lord Lefford met the procession at a crossroads shrine beneath a hacked-off weirwood stump, its face long ago stripped by Andals fearful of old gods. Lefford pledged 50 men to accompany Tyrion until the border of the Riverlands, an honor guard glowing with gratitude after tax reductions soothed their debt. Tyrion accepted and bade the Lord travel with them a while. Around campfire that night, they spoke of millers newly returned to abandoned mills, of a minor sept whose roof repairs had drawn stonemasons from as far as Fair Isle. Small deeds, Tyrion thought, falling together like snowflakes until an avalanche of change loomed. On the third dawn, they crossed the Red Fork's upper tributaries, water sheathed in thin ice that cracked like glass beneath hoof. Here, the memory of past wars breathed from every copse, scorched tree husks, cairns collapsed by weather, a rust-eaten helm caught in brambles. Tyrion rode silent, save for occasional orders to send riders ahead to scout. He felt ghosts press close, the cries of Green Fork dead, the roar of wildfire at the Blackwater, the hiss of crossbow strings. Brienne sensed his hush and offered steady presence, no words needed. At midday they encountered a ragged band of riverfolk clustered around a smoking ruin. Once a granary, now charred tooth in white field. Men's faces were soot-blank. Women clutched infants wrapped in singed cloth. Tyrion dismounted, boots crunching cinders, and knelt. A gray-haired woman recounted between sobs how roving sellswards, remnants of some disbanded company, had torched the storehouse after taking what wheat remained. Winter loomed cruel for the Riverland still. Tyrion beckoned Podrick. "Record their names," he said, "and allocate 2 of our wagon's grain sacks." Lefford frowned at the gift, but said nothing when Tyrion added, "Send riders to River Run with description of the raiders." This cannot go unanswered. As they prepared to leave, the gray-haired woman pressed a simple iron ring into Tyrion's hand. "Payment," she insisted. He slipped it over his smallest finger despite loose fit. "I'll keep it until you require its return," he promised. Snow thickened on the 4th day, slowing progress to a crawl along rutted tracks that wound through alder swamps. The world shrank to hood, reins, horses' steaming flanks. Conversations dwindled as each rider retreated into his own cloud of breath. Tyrion's beard stiffened with ice crystals. His fingers ached despite gloves. Yet progress, though plodding, remained unbroken, and by dusk, the high-water tower of River Run showed through swirling flurries, a dark monolith against a pewter sky. Torches lined the old stone bridge, spanning the tumblestone. River might once have roared beneath, but winter stilled it to sluggish murmur. Trumpets announced their approach. Banners of silver trout on field of blue unfurled atop parapets. A hush lay heavy until a lone figure strode forth. Sir Edmure Tully, hair threaded with gray, eyes awash with both welcome and apprehension. Behind him marched men-at-arms in river half-helms, pikes lifted like reeds. Tyrion nudged Balius forward until dwarf and lord stood nearly eye to eye by courtesy of differential mount height. "Lord Edmure," Tyrion began, voice carrying across icy water, "you host not only the lion, but the hope of a calmer realm." Edmure's breath puffed. "Hope is welcome beneath my roof, provided it pays in coin of action." Brienne's gauntlet squeaked subtly on her hilt. Tyrion lifted one brow, turning scorn to jest. "A fair exchange. We'll settle the rate inside, near hearth and ale, where accounts appear more generous." Edmure's mouth crooked into reluctant smile. "Enter, then." Gates groaned apart. The procession filed across the bridge. Horses' hooves clopping, wagons creaking, falcons keening as wind tugged their hoods. Within River Run's courtyard, torches, painted crenellations gold. Sansa Stark descended stone steps clad in a gown of deep blue velvet trimmed with midnight fur. Tyrion dismounted. Her eyes met his, calm yet keen. She offered her hand. "Lord Tyrion, Riverrun welcomes you." He kissed her knuckles lightly. "And I am grateful." Podrick tried to stifle a grin. Brienne, standing just behind Lady Sansa, nodded with quiet satisfaction. Tyrion's party was quartered in the eastern keep overlooking confluence of rivers. Fires blazed in hearths, beating back damp cold. Servants laid out mulled wine spiced with cloves. Steam spiraled fragrantly. Tyrion warmed his hands before flame while outside, bells rang signaling arrival of the Martell retinue. Flowing orange banners fringed with spears. Not long after rolled in the Tyrells. Their wagons draped in rose brocade even winter could not dull. The Erie's delegation, smaller, arrived on hardy Garrons, bred for mountain paths. Dragonstone's envoy, Lady Shireen Baratheon, cloaked in grey fleece, entered last, escorted by a thin line of crown-sworn swords. By evening Riverrun burst like a hive. Courtyards bustled with new tents. Stable yards overflowed, kitchens steamed with barley stew, spitted boar, almond cakes. Tyrion convened his small entourage in a solar hung, with faded tapestries depicting King Torrhen's surrender to Aegon. Maps sprawled across a trestle table. Brienne stood sentinel, while Podrick recorded notes. Lord Lefford reported that scouts along the northern coast of Fair Isle had sighted 3 foreign longships 2 days past sailing westward. Likely reavers, yet their sails bore no kraken. "Perhaps sell sails hired by she who shall not be named," Lefford muttered. Tyrion traced routes across the map with one stubby finger. "Send word to Casey in Faircastle. Ready beacon fires. But we do not escalate. Guarded docks, not blood on beaches." A knock interrupted. Olenna Tyrell entered. Hand upon Sansa's arm for guidance. Age stooped her, but did not bow her will. "Little lion," she said, eyes sharp as sewing needles. "I travel all this way through sleet, thick enough to drown a stag. So let us see if you intend to serve pie or platitudes." Tyrion gestured to the warmest chair. "Whichever you prefer, my lady. The crust may crumble, but the filling remains forthright." She snorted, seating herself. "Platitudes, then. I expected no less." Yet her eyes gleamed with something like approval. They spoke as shadows lengthened toward true night. Sansa added her soft counsels. "The North's grain yields this year, the free folk's desire for trade, the lingering mistrust of southern lords." Olenna lobbed barbs at Tarly's stubbornness and cautioned against trusting Prince Doran's health. "That man hides ailments the way others hide daggers." Tyrion listened, weighing each word. At long last he dismissed them to rest. Alone with Brienne, he allowed a sigh to escape. "The summit has not yet begun, yet already I feel I've been dragged behind a mule cart for leagues." Brienne removed her gauntlets, flexing fingers. "And Doran Swin Sigas," she said. "You've laid groundwork. Hold it." Tyrion gazed at her, gratitude bright in his eyes. "Stay close tomorrow. I suspect arrows will fly, some feathered, others barbed with flattery. Your shield for both, sir." Morning ushered in crisp blue sky over snow-blank battlements. Riverrun looked etched from glass. Inside the great hall, trestle tables had been cleared, replaced by a vast ring of chairs encircling a low oak platform on which stood a single lectern carved like intertwining river reeds. No dais loomed above. All lords would sit level, as Tyrion insisted. Emissaries entered by rank of arrival to avoid petty squabbles of birth. Martell, Tyrell, Arryn, Baratheon, and finally Northmen, escorting Bran the Broken-Born upon a wheeled chair of weirwood. Margaery Tyrell glided in trailing scent of dew-kissed roses, her crown a slim circlet of gold leaves. To her right stalked Garland the gallant, armor-polished, mirror bright. Prince Trystane Martell, cheeks flushed from river chill, whispered to the Red Viper's daughters, perched like sleek cats behind him. Edmure opened proceedings with a brief prayer to the Father of Rivers for calm currents. Then all eyes turned to Tyrion as he stepped upon the platform. He did not clear his throat or raise his arms. He merely waited until hush settled thick as wool. His words, when they came, were measured, almost soft. "10 years, my lords and ladies," he began. 10 years of blades unsheathed and banners torn, of barns burned and sons buried. Some among us still count those years by missing limbs or empty beds." He paused, letting the ghosts stand among them. "No chain binds us here, save choice. I ask you to choose the harder path, the one without certain victory songs, but with harvests secure and children who grow up knowing their neighbors' names rather than their sigils." Essin. He outlined the charter: Mutual Defense Pact, Arbitration Council to meet thrice a year in River Run, standardized tariffs to ease trade shocks, a rotating audit committee to supervise the Iron Bank loans, each clause structured with incentives, lowered grain levies for houses patrolling river routes, shared libraries of maester knowledge, marriage alliances predicated on equal dowries rather than coerced hostages. Tyrion couched none of it in highborn mysticism. He spoke of manure needed for fields, of roads needing cobblers and wheelwrights, of frostbite treatable by salves if supply lines remain open. When he finished, silence lingered like a held breath. Then Lady Shireen Baratheon stood, freckles dusted across scarred cheek, where grayscale once lingered. "Dragonstone supports this charter," she said, voice steady though young. "My lord husband died for justice. Our isle would rather build it than mourn again." The first stone laid. The Martells signaled descent next, conditional on coastal escorts to guard spice galleys. Tyrion accepted, pointing out that such patrols would likewise shelter stormlands and reach merchants. The Vale's Royce voiced concerns about mountain clans. Bran spoke then, remote yet uncanny. "Clans robbed of fodder raid. Feed them, and mountains quiet." Simple, perhaps, but the hint of green seer authority cowed dissent. It was Olenna who proved toughest. She tapped her cane upon the ringstone floor. "Grand words, dwarf. But I've heard songs that promised fig tarts and delivered only pits. Where is enforcement? Where are teeth?" Tyrion steepled fingers. "Teeth remain in each of our mouths, my lady. We do not file them down, we align them. So the bite of one is the bite of all." He held her gaze. "Your grandson's throne gains allies rather than supplicants. If King's Landing falls, every trade route suffers. So we defend it, but we do not bleed alone. Gold cloaks alone cannot repel a Sellsword army. Gold cloaks and roses and lions and trout can." Olenna sniffed. "Riddles. Yet." She sighed. "Better riddles than ashes." She inclined her head. Tacit consent. Hours ebbed in debate over fines for charter breach, number of arbitrators, the seat allotment for archmaesters, on oversight committees. Tyrion navigated each eddy with patience, weaving compromise. By dusk Sansa proposed adjourning to allow scribes to draft the first parchment. Agreeing, lords filtered toward corridors where warmth and wine waited. Tyrion remained seated, staring at the platform's worn grain as candle smoke curled overhead like ghosts, reluctant to leave. Brienne touched his shoulder. "One day nearly done." He smiled wearily. "1,000 more pieces yet to set, one at a time," she answered. The hall emptied until only Bran lingered in shadow, his pale eyes fixed on Tyrion. "Every stone bears weight," Bran murmured. Tyrion inclined his head. "Help me shore the arch, then." Bran's chair wheels turned silently as he vanished into gloom. Later, in a solar, Tyrion found a sealed message upon his table. The wax bore no sigil, an omen in itself. He slid it open. A simple parchment, a few lines scrawled in sharp hand he knew too well. "Little brother, you squander our name on peasants' dreams. While you prattle of packs, lions starve. Turn from this folly, or watch them devour you first." See, no flourish, no gaudy threat, but venom pulsed between letters. Tyrion traced the sea, imagining Cersei's smile curved like a cat's around a canary's wing. He let the letter curl in the hearth flames until only embers remained. The warmth they offered felt paltry. He crossed to a window. River Run's rivers gleamed under moonlight, sheets of silver sewn with black seams where ice had fractured. Somewhere beyond that horizon, his sister gathered storms and would hurl them soon. Yet for the first time Tyrion sensed he might greet the tempest with more than a bucket and curse. Allies rallied like cogs in a great mill wheel. If water grew wild, the wheel would turn all the faster, grinding threats into grain. But the wheel needed lubrication, trust, communication, small triumphs shared to cement larger ones. He turned from the window and drafted swift missives, to Vic and Tallheart offering timber to build North Coast watchtowers, to Paxter Redwine proposing joint naval drills, to the Iron Bank requesting dispatch of 2 auditors at once rather than 6 months hence. Each letter amplified yesterday's vow with today's action. The second summit day dawned brittle as spun glass. Scribes circulated drafted charter copies still damp with ink. Delegates argued punctuation, wherefore a comma might allow loophole for smuggling. Tyrion watched, amused. Pedantry signaled engagement. When discussion threatened to derail over precedence and signatory order, he produced a deck of tiles carved with house sigils and proposed drawing lots. The randomness startled them, but none dared appear petty. Tiles settled disputes within minutes. Then heralds burst in. Case Harbormaster's Raven reported attack, repelled but docks burned. 3 small fishing cogs sunk. Sail pennants bore a golden lion crowned. Cersei's new mark. Gasps rippled. Accusations blossomed toward Ironborn before fact. Tyrion rose. "We mourn Casey's grief, yet remain bound to purpose," he said. "This charter's first trial comes before ink dries. Let this hall show we stand ready." He requested Tyrell galleys already moored at Maidenpool to sail for Casey with healers and supplies. Martell outriders would alert Dorne's copper mines to dispatch shipwrights. The Vale offered grain until docks rebuilt. All within minutes the charter's spirit breathed life. Scribbles on parchment metamorphosed into food, wood, ships, and medicine. Tyrion thanked them, though inside he trembled. Cersei had not waited to bear claws. He pictured her on deck of some hired carrack, wild hair whipped by salt wind, cackling at the first blow landed. Let her laugh. Second, third, 10th blows would find shield walls stouter by each alloy of cooperation. Night closed round River Run like a velvet shroud pricked with frost stars. Tyrion walked alone along ramparts lightly dusted with snow. The rivers below looked like ribbons of smoke gliding among darkly gleaming fields. A inch of boots announced company. Sansa taught Kai. She joined him without greeting, gaze following current. "Do you fear her?" Sansa asked at last. "Every day," Tyrion admitted. "But fear, properly tended, fertilizes caution. Caution waters resolve." Sansa's breath clouded. "I once feared endlessly. Then I learned fear can teach. Yet one must not let it chain." She glanced at him. "You break chains with quills and ledgers, impressive though brittle." He chuckled. "Give me time. I'll forge fear itself into a treaty clause." They stood a while in companionable silence, snow settling on their cloaks until wind whisked it away like a playful child. The third day of the summit saw signatures affixed, each lord pressing signet rings into wax with ceremonial gravity. Tyrion signed last, not first, lest any claim he sought dominance. When the final seal cooled, Edmure raised the parchment high. Cheers erupted, rolling outward through corridors to training yards where pages paused sword drills to gape. Bells rang, hearths roared, casks were hoisted. Yet Tyrion slipped away before revels could dull minds. Work remained. In a private audience, he met with Garland Tyrell, Brienne beside him. They discussed merging Rose Road patrols with Western scouts, each detachment sharing signal standards. Next came Maester Theomore of the Eyrie, bearing steel-pointed quills to standardize record-keeping. Tyrion promised scholarship, stipends for any Mountain Clan youth willing to study at the Rock, and return with engineering knowledge to bridge steep passes. The Maester's bushy brows rose in surprise at such vision. Evening brought a candle-lit service in River Run's Septout Dato. Lady Shireen read from the seven-pointed star, voice quivering yet earnest. Tyrion knelt not for piety but solidarity. Many eyes tracked him, lion humbled among fishes and roses. Afterwards, in Cloister Gallery, he encountered Prince Trystane admiring a statue of Nymeria's landing. The prince admitted Dorne's isolation had grown tedious. My father listens, yet listens slowly. Tyrion proposed exchanging hostage fosterlings. A Martell youth at the Rock. A Lannister cousin at Sunspear. Lannister gold hair might sunburn, Trystane quipped, smiling. All flesh reddens under Dornish sun, Tyrion replied. They clasped wrists. But flesh reddens too under Whip-Eye Dock. On the summit's final morn, a northern outrider arrived half-frozen, bearing message of wildlings ambushed south of the Neck by bandits styling themselves Brothers of Vengeance. Crown loyalists who viewed free folk as invaders. Several wildling children taken hostage, a southern trader killed. The charter was tested again sooner than expected. Tyrion assembled a council in River Run's Upper Bailey despite cutting wind. He proposed immediate dispatch of a joint column, 80 mounted reachmen, 60 Northmen, 30 river archers, commanded by Sir Davos Seaworth, newly pledged to impartial arbitration. Supplies funded by Lannister coffers, path rights guaranteed by Lady Barbary Dustin. None objected. A raven sped north before sun reached zenith. That afternoon, scribes prepared duplicates of the charter for every seat of power. Tyrion penned personal cover letters to accompany each, sealing them with wax impressed by his own lion's sigil entwined with a quill. The symbolism pleased him. Feasts followed, yet these filled, not with gloating but gentle relief. Minstrels sang ballads of builder kings rather than conquerors. Children of visiting servants frolicked across flagged floors, while lords exchanged trade manifests. Tyrion drank moderately, savoring Arbor Gold's honeyed warmth as he watched Sansa dance a slow reel with Edmure's young daughter. For a moment, the hall shimmered like a snow globe stirred and lit from within. Still, he slipped out early, climbing a winding stair to River Run's highest turret. There he found Bran again, alone beneath star sprawl. Tyrion approached. Bran's eyes reflected constellations. "The river changes course," Bran whispered. "Yes," Tyrion said. "But does it flood or nourish?" Bran offered no answer. Tyrion exhaled vapor and looked skyward. The dust wine, the dragon's tail, the scribe, they all glistened. He wondered if some far-off historian centuries hence would name a new constellation for this moment. The Pact, perhaps, lines of starlight joining disparate points into coherent whole. Below, River Run's quiet sank into stone. Delegations would depart at dawn. Tyrion felt weight shift from anticipation to stewardship. Forging charter proved only first chapter. Implementation loomed, fraught with inevitable frictions. But he carried new steel inside, tempered by alliances, hammered by crisis, quenched in hopes of children singing harvest songs instead of dirges. On the 9th morning, since leaving Casterly Rock, he awoke to urgent knocking. Podrick burst in, face pale. "My lord, Casey Harbor beacon flares sighted again. Larger fleet this time." Tyrion swung legs over pallet. "Sound assembly. We ride west." Within hours his train, now bolstered by 50 Tyrell Lancers and 40 Martell Horse Archers, galloped from River Run's gates. Snow churned under hooves, banners snapped. Sansa stood on battlements watching departure. Their eyes met one heartbeat before distance swallowed view. He carried her calm like a pocketed stone, weight small yet centering. Hard riding cut travel to 7 days. Along the way ravens met them. Case held fast, thanks to improvised fire rafts blocking the narrow inlet, but Ironborn reavers had joined Cersei's cell sails, numbering near 40 longships. Tyrion quickened pace. Frost gave way to salt wind once more. Cliffs loomed, sea roared. They crested a ridge at dusk to behold flickering fires upon the water. Burning hulks anchored to form a barricade. Behind them, Casey's Bay bristled with makeshift palisades on floating barrels. Reaver ships lurked beyond, sails furled, oars shipped, waiting. Tyrion pitched camp just inland and convened a war council in a pavilion hammered to earth by gale. Lady Dorna Swift had arrived from Lannisport with fleet muster rolls. Garland Tyrell studied maps of underwater shoals, while Martell commander Sir Daciel Dane outlined range of scorpion bolts. Brienne oversaw sentries, voice cutting through wind like bellows. Throughout that night, Tyrion crafted a plot as cunning as any labyrinth. At dawn, a Tyrell galley bearing rose banners sailed forward under flag of parley, offering ransom for captured fishermen. While negotiations stalled, Lannisport fireships crewed by volunteers slipped around a hidden sandbar at low tide, guided by lantern signals from a Martell skiff. Simultaneously, on cliff tops above, Dane's archers unleashed salt-dipped flaming arrows onto iron-borne decks laden with stolen pitch. The sea blossomed into pillars of flame. Reaver oars caught fire, panic multiplied, and sail cohesion shattered. Some vessels fled seaward. Others grounded on shoals where Tyrell boarding parties leapt across waves. The main barricade opened, allowed trapped Casey fishing craft to escape. By noon, smoke drifted blue-gray across a bay strewn with charred timbers and limp banners of the crowned lion. Prisoners knelt under guard. Casey's folk lined shore cheering. Tyrion stood on the seawall, wind tugging his hair, tasting ash and brine. The Charter's first battle fought not as separate houses, but as one. Proof ink could indeed command steel. Yet victory felt bittersweet. Fires still burned, and somewhere Cersei vanished again into wake of defeat, nursing wrath for darker gambit. In makeshift infirmaries, Tyrion moved among wounded. He pressed cloth to a boy's gashed scalp, joked with a dykeman about marrying a mermaid, whispered comfort to a Martell archer whose lung gurgled with blood. Each life mattered, he reminded himself. Else peace was mere arithmetic. At sunset, he addressed assembled warriors atop a mound of damp sandbags. "Remember this day," he said, voice hoarse. "Not for who bled or triumphed, but for who stood together." Cheers rose, mingled, impossible to tell reach from west, Dornish from river. That night, seated by driftwood fire, he found a moment of stillness. Brienne sat opposite, eyes reflecting flame. "You risked much," she said. Tyrion rotated the iron ring gifted by the river woman round his thumb. "Worth every risk." He gazed toward dark horizon where stars pricked new holes. "The tides will turn again. Cersei will strike. Others too, perhaps dragons still sleeping." Brienne nodded. "We'll meet them. Aye." He smiled faintly. "With letters and long ships, wheat and warhammers." Waves collapsed in rhythmic sighs, as if ocean itself tired of violence. Tyrion sipped watered wine and let its warmth fan embers within. Around him peace and war braided a single rope, fragile but taut. He would climb it as far as will allowed. Before he slept, he penned a short note to Sansa, ink blotched by salt spray. "Case stands. The Charter has teeth. Tell the river woman her ring served well. D." He sealed it, handed to a raven keeper, and watched the bird vanish into starlit east. Then he lay upon damp sand, cloak folded beneath head. Balios cropping seagrass nearby, campfires flickering like scattered constellations across shore. Sleep, when it came, bore him not to nightmares of wildfire, but to a vision of children racing along a rebuilt pier, kites shaped like lions and wolves flapping in gentle breeze. Somewhere in dreams' distance he heard a woman laugh, a sound he had not heard since childhood. Whether it was his mother or some future daughter of the realm he could not know. Yet he clung to the echo until dawn. In pale light he rose, shook salt from cloak, and faced the horizon once more. The sea lay calmer than he had ever seen, a pane of burnished silver. He thought of Casterly Rock's parapet, where this journey began, and smiled at the unspooling thread that led him here. It stretched onward still, weaving through perils unknown, but now it glinted with colors wrought by many hands. He stepped forward, small footprints marking wet sand, every stride deliberate as the turning of the world toward a dawn that, for once, seemed intent on keeping its promise. Gani. The surf crashed ceaselessly against the black stone of Casey's battered harbor, rolling foam and wreckage against the pilings. Morning came slow, diffused by haze and wood smoke, and when the fog lifted, its tatters revealed the scars of battle. Charred hulls half sunk in the shallows, scorched rope tangled with barnacled anchors, the white and gold of the crowned lion banners crumpled beneath the boots of victorious men. Tyrion Lannister woke to the sound of gulls pecking at spilled barley near a splintered dock. The scent of salt and ash strong in his nostrils. His bones ached from the hard ground and a long night of restless dreams, yet as he rose and wrapped himself in his cloak, he felt no regret. The cost of peace was always paid in vigilance and toil. He had learned that truth by bitter increments. He moved among the survivors, his stride purposeful but unhurried. The wounded were everywhere. Some propped against overturned skiffs with arms in rough slings. Others sprawled on straw pallets, faces bloodless in the dawn. Martell archers and Tyrell men-at-arms spoke in soft voices to Casey fishermen, binding wounds with linen torn from sailcloth. The Dornish had lost 2, the Reach 4, the West 5. For every fallen, 100 lives had been spared. The Ironborn cell sails, routed and scattered, had abandoned their prize and their hope of plunder. The bodies of the dead were already being gathered for burial, a solemn line winding up the rocky headland toward a field above the tide. Tyrion joined the procession, hands clasped before him, head bowed in silent tribute. When he returned to the makeshift command tent, a battered pavilion patched with wine-red Lannister silk, he found Brienne and Lady Dorna deep in council. Maps littered the table between them, inked with new marks for reefs, shoals, and warning beacons. The Martell captain, Sir Dethiel Dane, entered moments later, his sand-colored surcoat still damp with sea spray. "We swept the southern strand at dawn, my lord," he reported, voice grave but steady. No sign of the Crowned Lion ships. A handful of prisoners surrendered near the mouth of the creek. Most were mercenaries from the Stepstones, desperate, scared, more likely to beg for bread than threaten our folk again. Tyrion studied the reports, tapping his finger against a list of casualties. "Any sign of Cersei herself?" he asked, eyes sharp beneath hooded lids. Dane shook his head. "None. The men we took heard only rumor. She paid them in gold and false promises, then vanished when the battle turned. A Myrish galley took her aboard before the fire ship struck. Where she goes now, none dare say." Brienne's jaw tightened, but her eyes were calm. "She will strike again. She is nothing if not relentless." Tyrion nodded. "Let her. Each gambit brings her fewer allies and more enemies. The longer she stalks the shadows, the more sunlight we pour into every crack. Then. He turned to Lady Dorna. "Casey must rebuild stronger than before. See to it that every able-bodied villager is set to work. Carpenters for docks, net makers for fleets, masons for the seawall. Martell and Tyrell coin will help pay their wages. In return, I want the first catch of every boat sent east to Lannisport and Riverrun. No family in the Riverlands or the West will go hungry this winter." Dorna inclined her head, her shrewd eyes missing nothing. "And the Ironborn prisoners?" "Hold them for ransom if their families will pay," Tyrion replied. "If not, put them to work hauling timber and stone. Let them earn their bread, but show them kindness. Hostages who are well treated will carry home stories of honor, not vengeance." As the day wore on, word spread that the charter had proven itself in fire. Messengers galloped down the coast, carrying news to every port and holdfast, from Fair Isle to Old Town. At each stop, the story changed only in detail. The houses of the realm had answered the call together, stood side by side, and turned back a threat that would have shattered any one of them alone. From the Eyrie to Sunspear, from the Frostfangs to the Arbor, small folk and nobles alike spoke in wonder, cynicism blunted, at least for a time, by the unlikely proof that peace could be more than a dream. In Casey's Harbor Square, Tyrion convened a council of shipwrights, merchants, and household stewards. The sun beat down upon the salt-stained cobbles as they debated the merits of hull design, the cost of pitch and tar, the relative virtues of spruce and oak. Tyrion listened, asked pointed questions, and, when tempers flared, diffused each quarrel with a joke or an offer of strong drink. "It is easier to build ships than trust," he told the gathered men, "but I expect both from you." He left them with gold for wages and a promise that his own masons and engineers would return within a fortnight. That afternoon, he walked the headland with Brienne, the wind tugging at their cloaks. Far below, gulls circled the battered remains of the bay, Every victory births a new challenge, she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. When word of this spreads, others may seek to test the charter. What will you do when the next storm comes? Tyrion considered, then shrugged. The same as always. Build alliances, share burdens, and show mercy where I can. Not all battles are won with swords or gold. Sometimes it is enough to offer bread to the hungry and shelter to the lost. I intend to do both, and more, if I live long enough. Daffo, she smiled. A rare, honest smile that lit her face like sunlight breaking through winter clouds. You are a strange lord, Tyrion Lannister. The realm is lucky to have you. He grinned back, the old mischief returning for an instant. Let's hope the realm agrees. If not, we may yet be forced to retire to Tarth and open an inn. I hear the fish are plentiful, and the wine is strong. Night fell again on Casey, and for the first time in memory, the harbor was quiet. The fires had been extinguished, the wounded tended, the dead laid to rest in shallow graves above the high tide line. Tyrion stood alone at the edge of the quay, watching the lanterns bob on distant fishing boats as they returned to the work of feeding their families. He thought of his sister, somewhere out on the dark water, plotting vengeance, and wondered what price she would yet exact from a world that had denied her crown. He felt no fear, only a grim resolve. Let her come, he was ready. In the days that followed, Tyrion's party traveled slowly up the coast, stopping at every village and holdfast along the way. At each, they were greeted as liberators, if not heroes. Banners of the great houses hung from rooftops, and children ran beside the horses, waving ribbons and singing new songs about the lion who had tamed the sea. At Lannisport, a feast was prepared in his honor. Platters of roast duck, stewed apricots, crusty loaves split open to reveal their steam. Tyrion accepted each tribute with a bowed head, distributing gifts of coin and promise in equal measure. He lingered at Lannisport, overseeing the restoration of the fleet. Shipwrights from Old Town arrived, bringing new techniques for strengthening hulls and caulking seams. Young men and women apprenticed themselves to Lannister engineers, learning not only to build, but to repair and maintain. At Tyrion's insistence, a portion of the harbor was set aside for free folk and riverlanders, ensuring that every vessel, no matter its origin, could find a place to dock and trade. Yet it was not only ships and gold that mattered. At evening, Tyrion held open courts in the Great Hall, inviting grievances and petitions from all corners of the West. He heard tales of border feuds, of poachers in the Greenfield woods, of lost sons and missing daughters. For each, he offered not only judgment but justice. A widow given work in the castle kitchens, a poacher sentenced to plant 100 acorns for every stag he'd taken, a missing girl returned to her kin after a rider dispatched with coin and a promise. Where justice faltered, mercy found its way. Where gold could not heal, words might. Meanwhile, across the realm, the charter's effects began to show. In the north, Jon Snow dispatched his own peacekeepers, mixed bands of former Night's Watch wildlings and Stark bannermen, along the borders of the Gift. In the Reach, Queen Margaery established markets at Highgarden, inviting merchants from Dorne, the Westerlands, and even the Riverlands to trade freely. At Sunspear, Prince Trystane Martell opened the southern ports to northern grain, ensuring that Dorne would not starve in the lean months ahead. At each council, Tyrion's name was spoken with a mixture of respect, suspicion, and, more often than he would admit, affection. But it was at River Run, weeks later, that the true measure of his peace was tested. Tyrion arrived in a rainstorm, boots caked with mud, cloak dripping. He was met at the gate by Edmure Tully and Lady Sansa Stark, both wearing the strained smiles of hosts, expecting trouble. The great hall was already crowded when he entered, every bench filled with minor lords, stewards, and emissaries from the realm's farthest corners. At the high table sat Bran the Broken, expression as distant as ever. Beside him, Maester Theomore and Lord Lefford whispered in urgent tones. A delegation from the Iron Islands had arrived the night before, led by a thin, sharp-eyed woman who introduced herself as Yara Greyjoy. She wasted no time in presenting her claim. "You would have us sign your charter, Lord Tyrion," she said, her voice loud enough to silence the murmurs. "You speak of peace, but where was your peace when my ships were burned and my brothers slain? You offer trade, but at what price?" Will the lion's law supplant the kraken's? Will my people become little more than tenants on their own shores? The hall fell silent. Tyrion met her gaze, unblinking. Peace comes not as a gift but as a bargain, he replied. You lost much in the wars, Lady Yara. Yet, so did we all. I do not ask you to yield your pride or your traditions. I offer you something more valuable, a place at the table. The charter binds all signatories to mutual protection and free trade. If the Ironborn honor their word, they will be protected as surely as the Lannisters or the Starks. If they break faith, the charter's teeth will bite. The choice is yours. Ben? Yara considered, her face unreadable. At last, she inclined her head. And what of my prisoners at Case? My men who languish in your dungeons? They will be released on your oath, Tyrion said. To keep peace, to raid no more upon the shores of the realm, and to answer for any who break faith. Should your people betray that trust, you will answer not to me alone, but to every house who bears the charter's seal. A long silence followed. Then Yara spat upon the floor and drew a dagger, slicing a thin line across her palm. The kraken swears, she said, blood glistening on steel. Let your peace hold, or your rocks will taste the sea's wrath anew. Tyrion nodded, accepting the oath with due gravity. The tension in the hall melted. Stewards poured wine, and the feast resumed. Afterward, Tyrion found himself alone with Sansa in the castle garden. The rain falling gently now upon the flagstones. She stood beneath a leafless ash, her hair pulled back in a simple braid, her eyes watching the river as it swelled against its banks. You handled Yara well, she said, not looking at him. Many would have tried to humble her or threatened war. You offered her respect, and a warning. Peace is not a game for the proud, Tyrion replied. It is a matter of patience and compromise, and the constant fear that you have overlooked some crucial detail. Each day I wake, I wonder what I have missed, what trap lies waiting, what old wound will fester. She smiled, soft and sad. That is what it means to lead, I think. To doubt, to fear, but also to hope. Nakasao. He met her eyes, and for a moment the world seemed very small, just the two of them in the half-light. Two souls battered by storms but not broken. If you ever tire of the North, he said, half in jest, there is always a place for you at Casterly Rock. I cannot promise comfort, but I can promise challenge. She laughed, and the sound was like music. I will remember that, my lord. In the weeks that followed, Tyrion moved across the realm like a chess piece. At Lannisport for the shipyard's completion. At Old Town to finalize a new agreement with the Maester's Citadel. At Highgarden for a festival of peace. At Harrenhal to preside over a trial by council for a Riverlands feud that threatened to spiral into war. He traveled always with a small retinue. Brian his shield, Podrick his squire and scribe, and sometimes Lady Dorna or one of the Tyrells. He found, to his surprise, that wherever he went he was greeted not with fear, but with something close to gratitude. Yet trouble brewed still. Reports came of Cersei's return. Her galley sighted in the company of foreign mercenaries off the coast of Blacktide. In the east, envoys from the free cities brought news that a new sellsword company, the Golden Falcons, had signed a secret pact with unknown Westerosi patrons. In the Reach, an uprising by former supporters of the late Randall Tarley flared briefly before being quelled by a joint force of Rose and Lion. Each problem, each threat, was met not with panic, but with resolve. The charter worked, not flawlessly, but well enough. One winter night, as snow began to fall over the fields beyond Casterly Rock, Tyrion returned home at last. The great keep was brighter than he remembered, its halls alive with laughter and the warm scent of roasting meats. Children ran through the corridors, their laughter echoing off the stone. In the kitchens, cooks prepared feasts for the harvest festival. Root stew, honeyed bread, sweet wine mulled with clove and orange. He found Brienne in the armory, her blade resting on her knees as she watched the flames. Well, he said, shall we call it peace? She looked up, blue eyes gentle but unyielding. For now, but peace must be guarded as carefully as any fortress. He smiled, bowing in mock reverence. Ser Brienne, warden of the West's peace. The realm could do far worse. Later in his solar, Tyrion sat by the fire, a cup of wine in hand and the iron ring from the river woman still on his finger. He read letters from the north, from the Reach, from the islands and the sands, and even the far-off citadel. Each spoke of struggle and hardship, but also of progress. Roads rebuilt, fields sown, markets bustling with trade. In every word, he found a glimmer of the future had wagered everything to build. He was not naive. He knew the peace could break. Old hatreds died slow, and there would always be those who sought to profit from chaos. But as he watched the firelight flicker across the golden veins in the rock stone, he felt, for the first time, something like hope. That night, as the snows fell thick and silent, Tyrion Lannister, the dwarf who had outlived his father's shadow and his sister's vengeance, closed his eyes and dreamed. He dreamed of ships gliding into safe harbors, of laughter around tables where enemies once plotted murder, of children born without memory of war. He dreamed of a realm at peace, and when dawn came, he woke determined to make that dream endure. For gold may glitter, and banners may rise and fall, but peace, when forged in hardship and humility, could outlast them all. He rose, donned his cloak, and stepped into the cold morning, ready to face whatever the day might bring. And winter deepened along the western coast, bringing hard frosts and restless winds that howled among Casterly Rock's towers. Snow gathered in the crevices between golden lion heads carved into archways, dusted the ramparts where sentries shivered in heavy cloaks, and softened the fields stretching toward Lannisport. The whole of the West seemed to brace itself, waiting, uncertain, but no longer numb with fear. Tyrion Lannister's name, once spoken in mockery or dread, now traveled ahead of his banner, a token of hope and change. Within the great keep, life found a new rhythm. Courtiers and counselors gathered in halls lit with mirrored sconces, where the light reflected twice for every shadow. Tyrion presided over these gatherings not as his father had, all silent menace and veiled threats, but as an orchestrator, encouraging debate, prodding the timid, deflating pride with wit sharper than any blade. He understood, better than most, that peace could rot from within if left unattended, and so he tended it daily, as a careful gardener prunes away dead growth to let new buds flourish. He met with Lady Dorna Swift to discuss crop rotations and river trade, sent Brienne and Podrick to oversee the return of Casey's fishing fleet, and sat for hours in the library with Maester Lunther's successor, a thin, shrewd young man named Maester Bennis, unraveling shipments, tariffs, and grain reserves. Tyrion insisted on seeing every ledger, every complaint, every scrap of news from the hinterlands. He corresponded with stewards from the Greenfield to the Golden Tooth, insisting that justice be swift but never cruel. Mercy extended wherever possible. He summoned hedge knights to train young men and women in arms, not for war but for the safety of the roads, the security of villages, the dignity of service. When word came that a sept had burned in a remote valley, arson by bandits emboldened by winter's hardship, he sent supplies for rebuilding, accompanied by scribes and healers rather than soldiers. One late afternoon, as Tyrion dictated a letter to Old Town's archmaesters concerning the storage of grain against blight, a page arrived with a message marked by the sigil of a fox. Tyrion broke the seal, scanning the lines. The fox belonged to House Charlton, whose lands nestled along the road to King's Landing. Lord Daemon Charlton warned of increased bandit raids on the Gold Road, refugees from the east embittered and desperate, stealing food and coin, waylaying caravans meant for Lannisport and the north. Tyrion dismissed the page and summoned Brienne, her armor dulled by travel, but her presence no less formidable. "We must break the bandits' hold before it strangles us," he told her. "But not with sword alone. Send a message to the Charlton, Falwell, and Craigie Hall houses. Have them marshal riders, yes, but also offer amnesty to any willing to lay down arms. Bread for those who surrender, justice for those who persist in violence. We will not let hunger become rebellion." Brienne nodded. "And if Cersei's hand is behind it?" "If she stirs the pot, Tyrion replied. Then we salt it with wisdom and patience. Her games thrive in darkness and resentment. We'll answer with food and fairness. If that fails, then we draw steel, but only as a last resort. As winter closed its iron fist, Lannisport's shipyards blazed with torchlight, masons and carpenters working late into the night. Tyrion made a habit of appearing without warning, speaking to apprentices as often as masters, sharing mugs of cider in the chill, offering coins to children who swept sawdust from the docks. He kept his ear to the ground, sensing shifts in mood, sniffing out discontent before it could root itself. During a gathering in the feasting hall, ostensibly to celebrate the launching of 3 new trade cogs, Tyrion addressed the assembled merchants and guild leaders. He stood atop a barrel for height, raising a goblet. There was a time, he said, when the West was feared for its strength, its gold, its unyielding pride. But now we will be known for something better. Let our ships carry not just silver and grain, but goodwill. Let every port know the lion's handshake is as firm as his bite. Laughter and cheers rose, and the wine flowed freely. Later, in the hush, after the feast, Tyrion lingered by the harbor, watching lanterns bob on dark water, feeling a swell of pride not for the wealth or power, but for the honest labor of people who for once were not afraid of tomorrow. It was during these days of relative calm that a raven arrived from the Vale, bearing urgent news. The letter, pinned in the careful hand of Lord Nestor Royce, described a border skirmish. A troop of armed men in black and gold had crossed into the upper mountain valleys, burning 2 villages, killing Roy's shepherds, and leaving behind the same crowned lion banners seen at Casey. We believe these are remnants of your sister's following, Royce wrote. Our knights pursue them, but the mountains breed cunning and cruelty in equal measure. Your guidance is sought. Tyrion read the letter in silence, then sent for Lady Dorna and Maester Bennis. We must not allow this to fester into a blood feud, he said. If the Vale strikes back blindly, innocence will suffer, and Cersei will have her chaos. He drafted letters to Nestor Royce, Sansa in Winterfell, and Garland Tyrell at Highgarden. He proposed a summit at the border. Vale Knights, Western Riders, Reach Outriders, and a Northern Observer. We shall root out the murderers together, he wrote. And justice will be served not by vengeance but by truth, witnessed by all. The following week, Tyrion journeyed east. A smaller party this time: Brienne, Podrick, a handful of trusted guards, and Maester Bennis. The snow in the mountains was deep, horses laboring with each step, but Tyrion would not be dissuaded. He stopped at every hamlet, listening to the grievances of farmers and millers, leaving behind food and the promise of redress. In the valleys below the mountain passes, the summit was convened in a modest stone hall owned by the Faith. Nestor Royce arrived first, armored and stern, his men bristling with suspicion. The Tyrells followed, led by Sir Garland, whose smile did not reach his eyes. From the north came Sir Roderick Castle, white-bearded but keen as ever. Tyrion greeted each with warmth, setting them at ease before the work began. Testimony was heard. Survivors of the raids, witnesses to the banners and the blood. Tyrion pressed for details. Were the attackers truly Cersei's men, or opportunists seeking to sow discord? Slowly, a picture emerged. A band of cutthroats, some indeed with ties to the disgraced Lannisters, others drawn by the scent of chaos. Tyrion proposed a coordinated sweep, but also an amnesty for those who surrendered and swore the Charter's oath. It was Sir Roderick, voice gravelly, who approved. Mercy, when mixed with steel, is more enduring than any blade alone. Together, the parties led their men through the ravaged villages. The black and gold banners were burned, the prisoners given trial, and, when warranted, a chance at penance. Some became guides for the Western Riders. Others went to work rebuilding what they had destroyed. Not all could be redeemed. The worst offenders were hanged before the valley's folk, Tyrion reading out their crimes himself so that justice was seen, not whispered. Returning to Casterly Rock, Tyrion found the people eager for his word. He spoke from the parapet. No lion shall prey upon neighbor, nor kraken raid our shores, nor wolf go hungry. We are bound together by choice and necessity. If we stumble, we do so together, and together we rise. Pendidolan. The next month saw the Rock at its busiest in a generation. A delegation from Bravos arrived, led by an austere, silver-haired banker who had expected bluster and instead found balance sheets. Tyrion charmed her with precise figures and plans for a credit system that would allow small folk to borrow for seed and tools, their debt tied not to their families, but to the harvest itself. Risk like gold must circulate, he told her. The banker returned to Bravos with favorable reports, and soon new ships appeared in Lannisport, their hulls deep with cargo. Trade with the Reach blossomed. Queen Margaery sent not just grain, but her own envoys, young men and women who studied at Casterly Rock's new counting house, sharing knowledge and forging friendships. The Dornish sent oranges and skilled masons to help rebuild the burned septs. The North sent wool and the Vale, iron for plows. Each wagon, each letter, wove a new thread into the tapestry of the realm. Yet even as prosperity returned, threats persisted. Whispers of Cersei's plots reached Tyrion through channels old and new. Smugglers in Lannisport spoke of coin flowing to mercenaries in the free cities. A bard from Old Town carried tales of a shadowy league, the Sable Company, rumored to be assembling in the chaos of the Stepstones. Tyrion treated each rumor seriously, but without panic. Keep your enemies close, and your enemies' informants even closer, he told Podrick. If war comes again, it will not find us unready. Through winter's darkest weeks, Tyrion found moments of solace in the smallest things. He walked the halls by candlelight, listening to the echo of children's laughter. He watched Brienne drill young squires in the yard, her patience infinite. He sat in the kitchens, sampling stews and listening to gossip. In the quiet of his solar, he drafted a letter to Sansa. Part report, part confession, part question. He asked her how the North fared, whether she still dreamed of summer, whether she believed their peace could last. Her reply came weeks later, scrawled in her own neat hand. We have planted the winter barley. The free folk teach us to trap hares in the deep snow, and the children thrive. There's no true peace, only the work of tending it. But I remember your words, and I try to make them true. Summer will come again, Tyrion, if only we are patient. He read the letter by firelight, her words warming him more than any wine. For the first time in years, he felt the ache of old wounds begin to fade. Yet the world did not pause for sentiment. In the thaw of early spring, word came from the south. A fleet flying false banners had raided a Tyrell granary near the Mander, burning fields and slaughtering livestock. The Martells reported similar attacks along the Dornish coast. Each bore the unmistakable mark of Cersei. Her new crown, painted in black, ringed with gold, a promise of vengeance. The council at Casterly Rock debated, some calling for war, others urging caution. Tyrion listened, weighing every argument. At last he spoke. To answer with fire is to play her game. We must answer with unity. Let every house send aid to the Reach and Dorne. Let us rebuild what she destroys. If she wants us to turn on each other, we shall instead draw closer. Only if she brings an army to our gates will we meet her with the full might of the Charter. Then, and so it was done. Supplies flowed from Lannisport and Casterly Rock, from Winterfell and Old Town, from the Erie and River Run. At each burned village, new seeds were sown, new wells dug, new walls raised. Mercenaries found themselves hunted not by one lord, but by many, tracked from Holdfast to Forest, offered amnesty and food if they abandoned Cersei's cause. Months passed, and the realm did not splinter. The unity of houses, tested by fire, only strengthened. By high summer, the markets of Lannisport were filled with goods from every corner of Westeros. Merchants from Essos came to trade, bringing spices, silk, and tales of a land finally at peace. Even the Bravosi banker returned, this time with an entourage, to discuss the opening of a great counting house, one to rival the Iron Bank itself. It was during one of these bustling days that Tyrion stood upon the seawall, watching the sails come and go. Podrick joined him, grown taller and more confident. "Did you ever believe it would last, my lord?" Podrick asked. Tyrion leaned on the cold stone, gazing at the horizon. "No, Dot. But I believe it now, at least for a time. And that is enough. We build, we heal, we forgive. That is all peace is, work, not a gift. He turned, squinting into the bright sun. One day, another storm may come. Another lion or kraken or dragon may rise. But when they do, let them find a realm that remembers how to bind its wounds, how to offer bread instead of steel. That is a legacy worth more than gold. The waves below crashed on, relentless but unchanging. Tyrion watched them a while longer, content. Behind him, Casterly Rock pulsed with new life. A house restored, a people renewed, a peace hard won, and for now, unbroken. And in his heart, for the first time, Tyrion Lannister felt not only the weight of his name, but the promise of all it could mean, if wielded not as a weapon, but as a shield. Spring crept over the Westerlands with cautious, shivering steps. The wind still laced with memory of frost, even as green shoots pressed through black earth. At Casterly Rock, the great bells tolled for the first planting, echoing over fields where freedmen, smallfolk and sworn swords alike gathered to thrust barley and wheat into rows as neat as soldiers on parade. The sea shimmered beyond, dotted with sails from Lannisport's newly rebuilt fleet. In the lanes of the city and the winding roads to inland villages, laughter grew more common than argument. Tyrion Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, found himself once again a traveler, not merely a master of scrolls and council tables. He rode at dawn, a small retinue at his back. Brienne in her silvered mail, Podrick Payne with his ledger and keen eye for trouble, Lady Dorna Swift representing the local merchants, and a few picked men-at-arms, honest fellows who had earned his trust by wit or mercy as much as by blade. The roads they took were busy with commerce. They paused at every way house and toll bridge to hear complaints and petitions, to offer bread and soft words, to mete out justice, where old feuds still simmered in the cold shadow of the past winter. At each stop, Tyrion spoke not as a distant lord, but as a neighbor, asking after the health of a flock, the birth of a child, the last decent rain. It surprised him, this pleasure in small matters. Once he had craved only the next jest, the next cup, the next reckless night. Now he listened with patience, finding the rhythm of rural life grounding, the worries of shepherds and bakers a counterweight to the schemes that still brewed beyond his borders. In the low valleys of the Greenfield, Tyrion and his party halted for a spring festival. Ribbons hung from the ancient oaks, sweet wine flowing in cheap clay cups, children chasing each other through fields of crocus and snowdrop. The Lord of the Greenfield, old and bent, thanked Tyrion with trembling hands for the seed grain sent after a winter fire destroyed their granaries. "We have enough now, my lord, to feed the hills and the valley both," he said, voice thick with gratitude. Tyrion clasped the man's hand, promising that the charter's bounty was not a single favor, but a covenant, to be renewed every season. That night he danced with the Greenfield's granddaughters, his laughter echoing in the lamplight. He woke with a headache and a sense of deep, abiding contentment. It was not always so simple. At the edge of the Crakehall woods, the party found evidence of a new bandit camp. Ashes cold, but bootprints fresh, and the remains of a plundered wagon scattered beside the road. Brienne and the men-at-arms tracked the culprits for a day and a half, cornering them in a ruined mill. The fight was brief and bloody. Brienne's sword kept Tyrion safe. Lady Dorna's voice persuaded 3 to surrender, rather than die for a lost cause. Tyrion questioned the survivors himself, learning that hunger and rumor of Cersei's gold had drawn them to lawlessness. He offered clemency to the youngest, sending them to labor on the roads and fields, and hanged only the 2 whose hands were stained with murder. He saw to the burials himself, reciting a simple prayer over the graves. "There is no profit in cruelty," he told his retinue that evening, "but nor can we build peace atop unpunished violence." From Crakehall they turned north, following the fast rivers where fishing villages prospered. Word came that the Ironborn were keeping their promises. Yara Greyjoy's ships patrolled the coast, wary but peaceful, her captains sharing weather warnings and sightings of foreign sails with Lannisport's harbormaster. On the borders of the Riverlands, Tyrion was welcomed by Edmure Tully, hale and ruddy-cheeked, who greeted him with open arms and an overflowing table. They walked the levees at sunset, watching storks hunt in flooded fields, discussing the future. "We lost much in the wars, Lord Tyrion," Edmure said quietly. "But I see now there is more to win than gold or land. You gave us that hope." Tyrion demurred, but Edmure insisted. "You brokered the peace. I intend to keep it, as do most who sit at your council. Even the stubborn ones." It was during one of these river walks that a messenger arrived, breathless and pale, bearing news from the east. "A riot at King's Landing, my lords," he gasped. Dreaded riots, started by whispers of hoarded grain. A crowd broke into the granaries, 3 killed, many wounded. The Queen calls for aid. Some say it was sparked by the last of Cersei's agents. Others blamed the drought in the Reach, or gold hoarded by merchants. Tyrion's mouth set in a thin line. "The price of peace is eternal watchfulness. We ride for King's Landing at first light." The journey south was swift. The Gold Road, recently swept of bandits, proved safer than it had been in years. They passed farmsteads where the wheat already rippled green, saw herds fattening in the meadows, and met more travelers than Tyrion could remember. Pilgrims, traders, knights on circuit. The city itself, when it appeared, shimmered under the sun, its walls white and high, banners fluttering in the breeze. At the gate, a company of gold cloaks greeted Tyrion with nervous respect and escorted his party through the bustling streets. The small council awaited him in the Red Keep. A sober assembly, with Queen Margaery presiding, Olenna Tyrell at her right hand, and Maester Orton, newly come from the Reach, clutching the scroll of the city's accounts. Tyrion listened as each recounted the causes of unrest: rising bread prices, a fire in Flea Bottom, the rumor that Cersei herself was behind the theft of several grain wagons bound for the city. "The people will not wait for explanations," Margaery said, voice tense but steady. "They demand food, and they demand justice." "Can the Rock spare more grain?" Tyrion nodded. "You shall have it, threefold what was promised. I will see to it myself that every sack reaches the gates." Olenna's eyes narrowed. "And the riots? Bread and open markets will quell most," Tyrion replied. "But root out the instigators, not with axes, but with questions. Who profits by unrest? Who whispers to the mob? I suspect Cersei's hand. But there may be others who crave chaos. Smugglers, old loyalists, even foreign interests." He proposed a citywide amnesty for all who returned stolen grain, and a reward for information leading to the instigators. Margaery agreed, and by evening, the first wagons rolled through the city gates. Tyrion spent the next days among the people, walking the markets, speaking with bakers and brewers, visiting the sept and the docks. He watched as loaves were handed out to long lines of hungry smallfolk, as guards kept the peace with soft words and open hands. Gradually the tension ebbed. The city stilled. He shared a rare private moment with Margaery in her solar, where they discussed the realm's fragile balance. "You have done well, Lord Tyrion," she said, her gaze direct. "But, you know as I do, our enemies wait for the first crack to widen." "I do," he replied, "but we shall give them nothing but disappointment." A week later, as he prepared to leave the city, Tyrion received a raven from Sunspear. Prince Trystane Martell wrote of a strange ship found wrecked on the coast, its crew dead or vanished, its holds empty but for crates marked with the crowned lion and foreign coins. Martell guards tracked survivors inland, finding only scraps of black silk and a handful of Braavosi coins. A warning, perhaps, or a test. Cersei reaches for allies, but none yet answer. Still, we remain wary. Tyrion pondered this, then wrote a reply urging the prince to maintain vigilance and continue the exchange of information. "The peace endures because we expect trouble and do not flinch when it comes," he wrote. "If you learn more, send word. If you need aid, you shall have it." On the return to Casterly Rock, Tyrion visited Old Town for the first time in many years. The city was alive with scholars, trade, and the hum of 1,000 voices. He was received at the Citadel with all due honor. More than he expected, less than he had once desired. The archmaesters questioned him closely about the charter, the flow of trade, the impact of unity on banditry and feuds. He answered honestly, knowing that knowledge, once shared, could not easily be withdrawn. He met with the masters of coin, the leaders of the city's guilds, the matron of a small orphanage recently rebuilt with funds from Lannisport. Everywhere, he pressed for practical measures. New granaries, wider roads, safe harbor for traders of all realms. When a fire broke out in the city's eastern quarter, Tyrion rode to the scene himself, helping form a bucket chain, organizing the rescue of trapped children, comforting the grieving. His presence drew a crowd. Some jeering, more cheering. One old woman pressed a cake of honeyed oats into his hand. "For your kindness at KC," she whispered. "We remember." By the time he returned home, the air of Casterly Rock was thick with birdsong and the promise of a rich harvest. News awaited him. The Iron Bank's counting house opened its doors in Lannisport, lending at fair rates to even the poorest. The Vale's mountain clans sent a delegation, pledging peace and offering iron ore in trade. A group of free folk arrived from the north, bringing furs and tales of a bountiful summer. The charter, once a fragile alliance, was now a living thing, an agreement not just in parchment and wax, but in flesh and blood. Yet even amidst this progress, Tyrion never forgot the old dangers. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the sea, Brienne joined him on the parapets. She had ridden hard from the east, dust still on her boots, eyes watchful. "There are still whispers of Cersei," she reported. "Some say she's fled to the Stormlands. Others believe she seeks shelter in Essos. The Sable Company has vanished, but there are reports of sellswords mustering near Lys." Tyrion nodded. "Let her run. The farther she flees, the less power she holds here. But if she returns, if any would-be tyrant returns, they'll find the gates closed, the people ready. We've learned how to stand together. That is our shield. Mendes in test." He turned from the wall, casting one last glance over the harbor and the fields beyond. "Thank you, Brienne," he said, his voice soft. "For your sword, for your patience, for believing peace was worth fighting for." She met his gaze, smiling with quiet pride. "You gave us hope, my lord. The rest was easy." Night fell, lanterns lighting the windows of Casterly Rock like jewels. Tyrion dined with his council, laughing at Podrick's awkward tale of a market mishap, listening as Lady Dorna reported that Lannisport's Newmarket had drawn traders from as far as the Stepstones. He poured wine for Brienne, toasted the harvest, and watched the shadows dance on the stone walls. For the first time in a long while, he did not dread the coming day. He walked the halls after, passing servants cleaning the flagstones, guards at their posts, cooks closing up the kitchens. He lingered in the library, reading a letter from Sansa Stark. A report of the North's first wildflower blooms, a sketch of a snow hare drawn by a child's unsteady hand. He placed the letter with the others, evidence of the world's slow, stubborn renewal. In the quiet of his chambers, Tyrion removed the iron ring from his finger, the gift of a riverwoman, a symbol of justice done and debts forgiven. He set it on the windowsill, where the moonlight struck it, and let himself hope. Peace was never perfect, never finished, never safe from harm, but it endured, stubborn as the rocks beneath his feet. Each day brought new troubles, new joys, new labor. And each day, Tyrion Lannister rose to meet them, not with gold nor fear, but with open hands and open eyes, carrying forward the promise he had made to himself and the realm. Let the world remember that for a time, the lion laid down his claws, that he brokered a peace not by threat or cunning, but by faith that men and women, given bread and dignity, would choose to build, not burn. That his legacy was not just Casterly Rock restored, but a realm remade. And as the sun rose over the western sea, bathing his land in light, Tyrion stepped onto the parapets, heart unburdened, watching as the banners of peace snapped in the freshening wind, bright as any crown. Oa, Kandi. The days lengthened, and the skies above Casterly Rock were a riot of blue and gold. The world alive with a promise as sharp and sweet as the taste of new apples. Tyrion Lannister awoke each morning to the music of a bustling stronghold, merchants unloading barrels of olive oil and Tyroshi wine in the courtyards, the laughter of children at play beneath windows, bright with banners, the distant clangor of forges hard at work repairing plows and mending the armor of men sworn to peacekeeping rather than war. He took to walking the halls and ramparts without escort, his limp a badge of honesty, his eyes alert for trouble or opportunity. Where once the rock had brooded behind its walls, locked away from the world's wounds and chaos, it now drew the West's lifeblood through every open gate. Tyrion listened to bakers discussing the year's flour, to shipwrights arguing about hull design, to scholars reading the latest proclamations from King's Landing. No longer a court of rivals and flatterers, the rock had become the realm's heart for reconciliation, justice, and the uneasy, joyous labor of peace. One afternoon, as a warm rain bathed the city, Tyrion hosted a council of stewards, guildmasters, and foreign merchants in the Lion's Hall. Benches overflowed with men and women of every stripe. Goldsmiths from Lannisport, leatherworkers from the Riverlands, Tyroshi and Braavosi, with their bright silks and sharp manners. Even a handful of ironborn captains seated near the hearth, weathered and wary but attentive. Lady Dorna Swift presided over the records. Brienne loomed like a silver statue at Tyrion's right, and Podrick scribbled diligently at his left. "Let us speak plainly," Tyrion began, raising his goblet so the firelight flashed along its rim. "Every war leaves a bitter harvest. Bandits and orphans, hunger and suspicion, these do not vanish when the swords are sheathed. But a realm that shares its labor and fortune sows a better seed." He nodded toward the Ironborn. "Trade brings more wealth than writing, and mercy more lasting friends than vengeance. It is a lesson hard learned, but worth the learning." His words rippled through the hall like a gentle wave. He motioned for Lady Dorna to read out the new toll rates. Lower for those who pledged to the charter, generous in credit for those still recovering from the last famine. Disputes arose. A Tyroshi trader complained of unfair shares. A Riverlands tanner accused a Lannisport wool merchant of price gouging. Tyrion let each speak, countered grumbling with wit, resolved complaints with compromise or a coin from his own purse. By day's end, the tension had faded, deals struck, grievances logged for review, a sense of order restored. After, he met with Brienne in the upper garden where bees hummed among blossoming orange trees. "It grows easier each season," he observed, watching as two freedmen debated the merits of southern squash versus northern turnips. Brienne smiled, just a little. "People grow accustomed to hope. They want to believe this peace will last." Tyrion nodded, but his eyes darkened. Some would see it undone for pride or for profit. He handed Brienne a folded note. "Word from the Vale. One of the old Lannister men, a distant cousin with nothing left to lose, has begun gathering discontents. Sellswords, landless knights, the odd hedge wizard. He boasts of reclaiming Casterly Rock, 4 true lions." Brienne's jaw tightened. "Do we send riders?" "Not yet," Tyrion answered. "Send a letter, offer amnesty for any who lay down arms and return to their homes, a year's grain for every sword surrendered. If that fails, then, yes, we send riders. But not to crush them. Only to remind them that mercy is our shield now, not merely our sword." Monday Newman. News from the wider world continued to trickle in. Some troubling, some promising. In the Reach, a sudden blight threatened the spring wheat. But Queen Margaery sent a plea for aid rather than a demand. Tyrion dispatched seed and silver with a message of solidarity, reminding her that the realm's strength is measured in shared burdens. From Sunspear came word that Prince Tristane's wife had borne a healthy child, a girl with her mother's dark eyes and her father's broad smile. The North's reply was a shipment of preserved venison and rare blue dyes, Sansa's signature looping with understated gratitude. The Vale sent a hunting hawk as a token of esteem. Even the Iron Islands, notoriously slow to trust, invited Lannisport shipwrights to teach new methods of hull sealing in exchange for barrels of wine and copper. Throughout the summer, Tyrion continued his tours, visiting hamlets by the Golden Tooth, fishing villages along the coast, and the broad fertile valleys feeding Lannisport. He traveled light, often in simple garb, Brienne and Podrick the only hint of his status. At night he listened to minstrels sing in smoky taverns, heard tales of narrow escapes and small mercies, the first sprouts of friendship between houses that had once traded only blood. Yet peace was always hungry for attention. In the foothills near Ashmark, a sickness struck several villages. Tyrion diverted healers and herbs from the rock's own stores, sparing nothing for his own comfort until the outbreak faded. In every case he demanded that mercy travel with justice. Where the sick could not pay, the charter's bounty covered the cost. "What is gold?" he asked a skeptical steward. "If not a promise of tomorrow's harvest?" In the records of the rock, he ordered the debts of all orphan children erased and pressed Lady Dorna to create a fund for apprenticeships. A lost parent should cost a child no more than a day's sorrow, not a lifetime of servitude. As summer ripened, the world beyond Westeros began to stir. Tyrion's spies reported increased activity among the sellsword companies in Pentos and Myr, with whispers of gold flowing from a mysterious Westerosi patron. Rumors abounded. Some claimed Cersei herself had resurfaced in disguise. Others that a coalition of old bannermen and broken men plotted to destabilize the fragile peace. In response, Tyrion redoubled the exchange of messages between allies. He encouraged Dorne and the Reach to run joint patrols, the North and the Vale to host tournaments as a show of unity. He invited the Free City's envoys to a grand harvest festival at Lannisport, offering trade terms that favored peace over predation. During those days of preparation, Tyrion spent more and more time among his people. He ate with the workers who rebuilt Casey's harbor, toasted the marriages of minor houses long estranged by war, danced at the midsummer feast with Sansa Stark, who arrived unannounced in Lannisport with a retinue of fierce northern women. Her laughter, clear as a bell, drew smiles from even the grimmest knights, and when she took Tyrion's hand, all saw the bonds of alliance and respect, no longer merely the memory of an unhappy marriage, but the shared work of governance and hope. The festival was a triumph. Tents of red and gold, blue and silver, rose and green crowded the city squares. Minstrels played, children raced on hobby horses, and traders from Bravos and Lys set up booths beside Dornish wine cellars and northern cheesemongers. In the great square, Tyrion presided over games of wit and chance, awarding prizes to a shepherd girl who recited all the Westerland's rivers and a one-eyed fisherman who sang a new ballad of the Lion's Peace. At dusk, as lanterns bobbed on the sea breeze, he climbed the steps of the old lighthouse and looked out upon the harbor, its waters brimming with ships from every realm, the city's fires twinkling like stars. But all joy in Westeros must be paid for. 3 days after the festival, a raven arrived from Old Town. The Sable Company had finally shown its hand, burning a Reach granary and killing 2 Tyrell knights in a midnight raid. Their leader, once a Lannister captain, now gone to mercenary gold, left a warning scorched into the earth: the lion's blood will flow. Tyrion called his council at once. Brienne, armored and grim, counseled caution. If we answer fire with fire, we become what they hope, a realm ruled by vengeance. Lady Dorna urged him to fortify the roads and ports, offer rewards for information. Podrick suggested sending envoys to the Reach, to offer help and reinforce the Charter's strength. Tyrion listened, then rose. "We will answer not with war, but with presence. I will ride to Old Town myself. We bring healers and carpenters, not just soldiers. We make a show of unit, the Charter lords together, standing with the Tyrells." He dispatched ravens to Margaery, to Sansa, to Trystane, to Royce and Yara Greyjoy, requesting their company, or a trusted envoy. "Let the world see our strength is not in swords alone, but in resolve and mercy." The journey to Old Town was swift and highly public. Tyrion's procession included banners of every major house, wagons laden with grain and lumber, a cohort of healers and engineers. At each town and hamlet, the locals cheered, throwing flowers and singing the Lion's song. In Old Town itself, the city's bells pealed, the archmaesters standing in their highest tower to watch as the lords of Westeros entered side by side. Queen Margaery met Tyrion in the cathedral square. Her eyes brimmed with relief and fire. "Your presence quells rumor and fear, Lord Tyrion," she said, clasping his hand. "Let us rebuild together." So they worked, replacing burned grain with the rock's stores, healing the wounded, overseeing the arrest and trial of the Sable Company's captured men. Tyrion presided over the tribunal, allowing witnesses to speak, ensuring that even the guilty received a hearing before justice was served. When the ringleader, a gaunt, scarred man once sworn to Tywin, cursed Tyrion as a traitor, Tyrion only shook his head. "You clung to the past while the world changed. May your sons learn mercy, if not wisdom." Benetran. The trials and rebuilding lasted nearly a fortnight. When it was done, the lords gathered in the Starry Sept to renew their vows. Tyrion spoke last, his voice ringing through the incense-filled nave. "Peace is not a matter of treaties, nor the absence of war. It is bread for the hungry, justice for the wronged, forgiveness for the broken. We are bound by this charter not to a single vision of glory, but to the endless work of healing. May we never forget it." Now, on the return to Casterly Rock, the land seemed different. 1,000 small victories blossoming, 100 wrongs slowly righted. Tyrion received reports of the first joint market between Ironborn and Riverlanders, of the North sending sheep to Dorne, of Braavosi bankers lowering interest for small folk loans. The world was not perfect. Smugglers still tried their tricks, feuds still simmered in backwaters, and Cersei's shadow still flickered at the edges of rumor. But the realm endured. One night, Brienne found Tyrion in the Old Solar, staring into the embers. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "You could have ruled by fear, and no one would have blamed you." He smiled, weary but honest. "I have ruled by fear before, Brienne. It did not save me, nor did it save the West, or my father, or my brother. I would rather be remembered for bread and laughter than for fire and blood. Let Cersei haunt the tales of vengeance. Let us write the stories of peace." Brienne nodded, then turned away, her armor glinting in the firelight. Tyrion lingered, savoring the warmth, the hush, the faint music of wind outside the window. When he finally rose, he looked out across the dark sea, the city's lanterns mirrored in the water, and he thought of all those who had labored, hoped and suffered for this fragile age. He raised his goblet in silent salute. To Sansa, to Brienne, to Margaery, to every merchant and squire, every orphan and scribe. "For peace, hard-won and dearly kept," he murmured. "For the world as it could be, and may yet remain." And as the dawn crept over the horizon, painting the rock and its fields in molten gold, Tyrion Lannister, Lord and Lion, stepped into the day, his steps deliberate, his heart unafraid, his legacy a work yet unfolding with every breath of the new world he had wrought. In Sidin, the sun rose silver pale on the morning of the New Year's first moot, and Tyrion Lannister gazed out from his solar as banners of every color brightened the roads below Casterly Rock. He watched knights in burnished plate lead ox-drawn wagons, women in simple kirtles and shepherd's cloaks, a scatter of Braavosi in sea-blue doublets, reachmen with roses woven into their sleeves, even a column of Ironborn with their kraken sigils trimmed in gold. A gesture of prophet. The spring air was cool and sharp, fresh with the promise of rain. Below, the fortress hummed with life. The kitchens already stoked, the great gates flung open, and children laughing in the courtyards where once only wary silence reigned. Tyrion wore no crown and carried no sword, but the gravity of the day settled on his shoulders as he donned a dark tunic and heavy cloak. Both bearing the Lannister lion worked in thread of gold. Brienne met him at the bottom of the stairs, armed but at ease, a reassuring presence. "Podrick says the last caravans are almost arrived," she reported. "Some from as far as White Harbor." Tyrion smiled. "Let's hope they brought their appetites and not just grievances." The moot was held in the great hall, stripped of its old trappings of menace and made bright with garlands, banners, and sunlight streaming from new windows cut in the south wall. Benches packed the floor, and people crammed the aisles. Small folk, knights, counselors, foreign merchants, the proud and the poor alike. At the high table sat the Charter's great lords, Margaery in Tyrell green, Trystane in Dornish orange, Sansa in simple wolf gray, Edmure in river blue, and Garland the gallant resplendent in gold and silver. At their flanks sat stewards, healers, scribes, and a clutch of free folk, their weathered faces open with curiosity. For the first time since the conquest, the hall was ruled by consensus, not by fear. Tyrion stood, and the crowd's murmur faded. "Let us begin not with speeches, but with bread," he said, signaling to the kitchens. Trays of barley loaves, cheeses, dried fish, and honey cakes circulated the benches, the air filling with the aroma of feast. "We break bread as neighbors," he continued, "not as strangers. All quarrels set aside, all debts forgotten for this day." Children giggled as they tore into cakes. Old enemies shared wine. Even the Bravosi bowed their heads, muttering their own prayers for fair dealing. After the meal, matters turned to the realm's business. First came a petition from the Reach. A blight had struck the Mander's wheat. Queen Margaery spoke candidly, asking aid, seed and silver to bridge the coming lean months. Tyrion nodded to the Master of Coin, who read out the ledgers. "The Rock and Lannisport stand ready," Tyrion said. "The North will send dried fish, the Iron Islands salt cod. We'll not see bread riots nor hungry children while peace holds." The crowd's applause was sincere, the promise more than mere words. Next, a quarrel between two river villages, each claiming the same stretch of fish-laden stream. Edmure proposed a compromise. Both villages would share the waters, each alternating days, the catch overseen by a neutral party. Tyrion nodded approval, and Sansa suggested a small market be held at the streamside each week to build goodwill. The villagers, surprised, agreed, old hatreds softened by the lure of trade and community. The moot moved on. A Dothraki merchant requested land to settle and breed horses. Tyrion welcomed them to the Westerland's high meadows, provided they obeyed the laws and pay their share. The Bravosi offered low-interest loans to rebuild a wind-blasted sept. In return, Lannisport agreed to house a new counting house and mediate disputes. The free folk requested permission to trade in southern towns, and Sansa vouched for their honesty. "The North remembers what it means to go hungry," she said. "Let us be the hand that feeds, not the fist that bars the gate." Even the Ironborn, wary and blunt, pledged ships for patrolling the coasts in exchange for fair harbor and a share of a year's catch. The day wore on, and when at last the petitions ebbed, Tyrion invited musicians to the dais. Songs rose, ballads of peace and recovery, not conquest. A Dornish girl sang of orchards heavy with fruit. A smith from Fair Isle composed a tune about repairing the castle's ancient gates. The free folk chanted stories of the long winter, their voices rough but vibrant. Children danced. Laughter and music swept the hall until dusk. Later, as shadows lengthened, the councillors gathered in Tyrion's private solar. They reviewed the day's agreements, debating the best ways to enforce them. Bennies, the young maester, produced maps showing new routes for grain caravans and charts for tax relief in blighted lands. Sansa and Trystane discussed establishing a school in Lannisport where children of all nations might study together. A peace built on learning not just law, as Sansa put it. Garland Tyrell proposed forming mixed patrols of knights and free folk, and the Ironborn captain offered to host them on his ships. Tyrion watched them, letting their voices fill the room. The charter had grown beyond him. It was now a living thing, its roots sunk deep in every house and every field. He contributed where needed, clarifying points of law, smoothing ruffled tempers, reminding them all that the small folk must see justice as a daily bread, not an occasional feast. As the moot drew to a close, Tyrion made the round of the lower halls, speaking quietly with stewards, guards, and visiting merchants. He inquired after the health of a new mother, the repair of a bridge swept away by spring flood, the state of the city's wells. In the kitchens, he thanked the cooks for their work, laughing with them over burnt honey cakes and the hazards of foreign spices. At the stables, he stroked the nose of a dappled gelding gifted by a Vale lord, promising the stable boy a silver coin for his good care. At midnight, with the castle quiet, Tyrion walked alone on the walls. He thought of the years past, of loss and vengeance, ambition and exile, of the long hard climb from scorn to respect. He remembered his father's cold demands, his sister's venom, Jaime's laughter, Shay's touch, the taste of wine, and the terror of battle. But these memories faded against the present. The laughter drifting from the city below, the glow of lanterns along the harbor, the banners of rival houses fluttering side by side above the gates. He was not blind to the risks. Cersei was not dead. Her last known ship had vanished near the arbor, and there were always rumors of mercenaries gathering in the east, or of discontent among those who saw peace as a threat to their old privileges. But Tyrion trusted now in the charter and in the people who upheld it. The strength of the realm was not in stone or gold, but in 1,000 small hands building and mending. Day after day. In the weeks after the moot, Tyrion led another tour, this time east, through the hills toward the border of the Riverlands. He traveled with a retinue mixed of Lannister, Tyrell, Stark, and even a few Ironborn, a deliberate display of unity. They helped to clear a landslide near Golden Tooth, adjudicated a squabble over mill rights, and listened to a request from a septa wishing to found a home for war orphans. Tyrion approved a grant of land and funds, stipulating that the children be taught reading and numbers as well as the faith. Along the way, the party encountered a band of Free Cities traders, some bearing letters of safe conduct, others seeking them. Tyrion insisted on fair tolls for all, and required the traders to donate a portion of their wares to local temples and poorhouses. Charity is the best coin you can spend in a strange land, he advised, and the traders grumbled, but complied. In one riverside town, they found the villagers gathered to witness the wedding of a Reach maiden and a mountain clansman, unlikely match, but one blessed by both their lords. The feast was humble, the gifts practical, but the joy was real. Tyrion raised a toast to the couple, wishing them not luck, but patience, laughter, and full larders. At dawn, he left behind a purse of silver and a letter granting the village market rights, binding their prosperity to the charter's peace. As the tour neared its end, a rider arrived from Casterly Rock, breathless and muddy. "Urgent news, my lord," the man stammered. "A fleet, perhaps 30 ships, sighted off the Shield Islands. They bear black banners with a golden lion and a new device, red flames." The council convened at once. Letters flew to the charter lords. Brienne suggested doubling patrols and readying the beacons. Sansa advocated for calm. No sign of attack yet, only maneuvers. "Let us gather strength and intelligence, not panic." Tyrion agreed, dispatching swift ships to shadow the fleet and offering terms of parley if they sought to land. "If this is Cersei's hand at last, let her see the realm stand together. We do not strike first, but we stand ready." Throughout the tense days that followed, the realm held its breath. Reports came in. The fleet hovered, probing for weakness, then withdrew, leaving only a single longboat washed ashore with a message nailed to its mast. "The day will come when the lion must bleed." Tyrion ordered the message posted on every gate, adding beneath it in his own hand, "We have bled. We have healed. We do not fear the knife." The harvest came in strong, the markets brimmed with food and trade. Tyrion presided over the fall moot, reaffirming alliances, rewarding those who had held fast through fear and uncertainty. When the winter snows came at last, there was enough in the granaries for all. Tyrion sat by the fire in the Rock's great hall, reading Sansa's latest letter, a tale of northern children sledding down the hills, of wool and firewood enough for every hearth, of hopes for the spring. One evening, as wind rattled the shutters and frost filmed the windows, Tyrion slipped out to the city's taverns, disguised in a plain cloak. He listened to the gossip of merchants and masons, drank mulled wine with strangers, joined in songs both bawdy and sweet. Most spoke not of war or rumor, but of trade, of marriages, of good harvests and small quarrels settled by law, not blade. Tyrion smiled as he raised his cup, content to be but another voice in the great, stubborn chorus of the living. When he returned to the castle, the halls were hushed. The great hearth banked low. He found Brienne waiting in the shadows, and together they walked the ramparts above a moonlit sea. "Do you still fear?" she asked. Tyrion paused, considering. "Of course. Fear keeps the mind sharp. But I do not despair. The realm stands not because of me, but because enough people have chosen to mend, not break." That is the true strength of the rock. Brienne clasped his shoulder, her grip firm. You led them here. I gave them a road, Tyrion said quietly. They chose to walk it. That is the only power worth having. The wind howled, but below, the city lights burned warm and bright. Tyrion watched until his eyes stung, then descended into the depths of Casterly rock, ready to dream again of peace. Enduring, imperfect, but real, written not only in banners and law, but in every loaf, every hearth, every small kindness of a realm that had learned, at last, the worth of its own tomorrow.